Pentagon. Now, depending on what the judge ultimately rules here, we have to remember the courts have often given some deference on national security questions to the government. This really could have far-reaching implications because, Danny, there are so many other big Chinese companies on this list. Most recently, they added Baidu, BYD. We also see some top chip makers, including CXMT, YMTC on there, as well as Tencent. So this will have some ripple effects beyond just this courtroom.
Mike, what are they currently lobbying for, and what other companies are they competing against for these aims?
But Vonnie, all the companies that you can think of under the sun are looking for one break or another from the government. And in part, what they would like to be able to do simply is to be able to lobby the Pentagon so that they can get their names taken off the list. There are a lot of different ways that they can make these appeals to be removed from the so-called 1260H list. That's that refers to the section of law that established this list that the Pentagon is supposed to put together and publish every year of companies it believes serve the People's Liberation Army. They can fight that in court, or they can just try to take their appeals through a different manner, just by knocking on doors at the Pentagon, going to members of Congress, going to other parts of the administration. But unless they have a registered lobbying firm here working on their behalf, that becomes much harder. And in this case, it would, in essence, start to really brush up against this new law that took effect last week.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. Bloomberg's Mike Shepard in Washington, D.C. Coming up, RBC's Lori Calvasina on her firm's new S&P 500 price target of, get this, 8150. This is Bloomberg Open It.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for joining. Please help support the work that I do by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me. You can also help support by being a paid member to my Patreon channel or my Substack channel. All these videos are for free, so please help support the work that I do. In addition, make sure you subscribe to all the channels. I have YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, X, GETTR, Substack, Buy Me a Coffee. There's lots of ways to follow my work. I also have archives of the audio version of my podcasts, and you can see the live streams. The audio and the live streams on my website are under broadcast. So thank you for joining. Please help support the work that I do by sharing the links. I greatly appreciate it. Right now, the market is not open yet. The cash market, the futures market is suggesting that the S&P 500 will be going up. The futures market for the S&P 500 is at 7,554. VIX is trading at 16.47. The euro is trading at 114. Japanese yen's trading at 162.34. Oil is trading at 68.66. It's going to test that resistance level of 68.78. This is the third time that it's tried to retest since the European session. Bitcoin is trading at 61,600, and natural gas is trading at 3.217. Today's trade for me, I'm putting in positions for longing the S&P 500 and shorting natural gas. With that, please help support the work that I do by getting the great products that I offer on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I have structural nail silver lozenges. These are perfect during the allergy season and the cold season. If you're working in the home, cleaning, working in the garage, in the garden, in the basement, and you don't want to get sick because of the dust or the allergens, make sure you use these structural nail silver lozenges, and it will help to neutralize the allergen. You can get it in orange splash with vitamin C. It's fortified with vitamin C and Manuka honey. But again, these are structural nail silver and they help to neutralize. Perfect for the allergy season and the cold season. Make sure you have some at work and at home. You never know when you need them. They're very effective and very high quality. So make sure you get some for your home. And if you're 40 years of age or older, it's really important to take vitamin B complex. The reason being is that you need to boost up your cellular metabolism, protect your neurons, and help with your energy levels. Vitamin B complex, the first 4 B vitamins, helps the electron transport chain inside your mitochondria to produce more ATP. Vitamin B complex revs up that cellular metabolism and protects it will protect your neurons through vitamin B12. So please go to my store, make sure you take vitamin B complex if you're 40 years of age or older. Super important. With that, let's go back to, let's listen into Al Jazeera. The Supreme Leader's funeral was over the weekend, and I think it's important to just listen in on what's going on there before we switch to some other news.
Son-in-law, his daughter-in-law, his grandson, and his own daughter, who were all killed on the very first day of campaign of airstrikes by the Americans and Israelis.
Well, since the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran has entered a new political era. The US and Israeli war didn't bring down the government, but it appears to have sparked internal changes. Under his successor and son, Mujtaba Khamenei, Iran has seemed more confrontational, from attacks across the region to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Al Jazeera's Ali Hashim reports now on the new leadership's path for the country.
This is not the Iran that existed before the war. The system survived the assassination of its supreme leader and several high-ranking officials, but it did not emerge unchanged. Mujtaba Khamenei, the son and successor of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has moved to assert himself. Unlike his father, he has chosen direct confrontation outside of Iran and then inside. Tehran attacked neighboring countries and pushed the conflict with the United States and Israel to the edge. Washington did not achieve regime change, but it may have helped produce change inside the system. At the heart of the new posture is what officials in Tehran call deterrence. Iran is signaling that another war against it would be expanded beyond its borders. The control over Hormuz has been the clearest expression of that doctrine. For Tehran, the message was simple. If Iran cannot have stability, others will not buy and sell oil as usual. The confrontation with the US and talks to end the war have become a tit-for-tat contest, each side testing the other without knowing where the red lines lies. The shift is also visible in the wider region. The war in Lebanon to end truce and retaliated after the Israeli attack on Beirut's southern suburbs. Lebanon is no longer treated in the security equation. Then there's the funeral of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in Iraq. By taking this ceremony through the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala, Iran is declaring that its influence across the Shia world will continue. But the new Iran is not without internal tension. There are differences inside the state over whether talks with Washington can still produce results. The decision-making circle has changed. Power appears more concentrated and less cautious. Yet the country still faces sanctions, economic pressure, public fatigue that could reignite mass protests and aftermath of the war. The post-Khamenei era is taking shape under fire, more assertive, more regional, more willing to escalate, but also more exposed. What is visible now may be less a settled doctrine than a series of acts of defiance by a new leader trying to prove authority. The real test will come when the war ends, the crowds disperse, and Iran has to decide whether this era is built on confrontation alone or something more durable. Ali Hashim, Al Jazeera.
After running the Gaza Strip for nearly 2 decades, Hamas has announced the dissolution of its governing committee. It paves the way for a transitional technocratic committee to assume responsibility. The committee's activities will be overseen by the Board of Peace, which was set up by US President Donald Trump when the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel was agreed in October.
The head of the emergency committee has just resigned. the government has been dissolved for the preparations to transfer the national roles to the Gaza Management Commission. It's with confidence that all the preparations for the handover of legal responsibilities of Gaza Strip has been completed. These arrangements were presented in a transparent and official manner to the delegation representing the Palestinian factions and the Higher Commission of Tribes.
Despite the ceasefire, Israeli attacks are continuing across Gaza. Israeli forces have killed at least 6 Palestinians on Monday. 4 people were killed in 2 separate attacks in Khan Yunis, and several others were injured. And in Gaza City, 2 people were killed when an apartment building was hit. Israel has killed more than 1,000 people and wounded over 3,000 since the truce took effect.
The Israeli targeting is not stopping. There are people saying there's a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. We do not see it.
All right, so we're going to switch over to some news here. Let's listen into Victor Davis Hanson. This was published by Fox News 2 hours ago.
We want to reflect on the state of the nation. I checked in with an American historian, Hoover Institution Senior Fellow Victor Davis Hanson, to get his report card. I wanted to pick your brain a bit as a historian as we mark 250 years. How do you think we're doing as a country?
I think we're doing pretty well. Our Constitution has been under a stress test lately, but it's durable. It's the oldest constitutional republic in the world right now. And as a historian, I always look at the historical barometers of a healthy society, and they're pretty fundamental. Fuel, we're the biggest producer of oil and gas in the history of civilization. Food, we're the largest food producer, contrast to China that imports 30% of its food, 11 million barrels of oil a day. Our military, the recruitment's up. We're starting to stress quantity and different types of procurement and weaponry. It's at its zenith. I think it's very good. Our fertility rate, Shannon, has gone back up to about 1.71. It's not where it's a millennium. That's a good barometer. I think most of our worries are about unity. I think there's a little recrudescence of tribalism where people are identifying by their ethnic, racial, religious, sexual orientation, identity as essential rather than incidental to being an American. And we have the most immigrants we've ever had that were non-native born, 53 million, 16% of the population. We know the melting pot works, it has in the past, but with this new types of large numbers, percentage and actual numbers, we need to get back to the melting pot and kind of drop this salad bowl flirtation. So I'm kind of worried about that. But otherwise, I think we're in good shape.
Well, that's good, coming from you, to hear the positive outlook. I want to talk through those who aren't so sure. We've got brand new Fox News polling. It says this: how well is democracy working in the U.S. today? Extremely or very well, 39%, but 60% say they don't think it's working very well or not at all. What do you say to those who feel like, okay, we've got some negatives here, and for some in our polling, those outweigh the positive?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, and I'll be blunt with you, I think a lot of it is the 40 to 45% who are college educated. I spent 50 years of my life in the university, but I must tell you that it's no longer empirical and inductive reasoning anymore. It's more indoctrination, especially in the social science and humanities. So what basically, and these are the people who train our K through 12 young people. So from K through 12 to the BA for about almost half the country, they're getting drummed into them that we're a racist, sexist country that was bad at the beginning, that got worse during our maturity, and is awful now. And so we've really got to address that and reintroduce civic education and basic history. We don't teach history. History is now melodrama about the sins of the past rather than tragedy, where certain things happen in the world and we try to overcome them. And then the final thing is it's always absolute, especially with the left. They never say compared to what. It's very strange to have 50 million people and half of them come in here from, I'll be frank, failed states, and yet they're very critical of the state or nation or culture that either they or their parents chose to embrace and come here, and yet they're so critical, and yet we never say to them, well, why did you come? I think people have to be more explicit in their love of the country and to appreciate how different it is and how exceptional it is compared to the alternatives. And we don't ask that of anybody anymore. But we need to cross-examine a lot of people who just have this boilerplate negativity.
Well, I will say that one of the bright spots in our polling shows the majority of people do believe our best days as a country are still ahead of us. And from that, I take some optimism as well. Professor, thank you for your time. Always good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, the markets are open. The S&P 500 is trading at 7,518. I still have a year-end target of 7,800 to 8,000. The oil trade is trying to break through the 68.78 barrier, the $68.78 barrier. It's trading at 68.70 at the moment. Natural gas is trading at 3.2. I'm longing equities and shorting natural gas at the moment. All right, let's listen into this is a clip on Times News about Trump versus Mondani.
We've seen a dramatic slowdown in our fundraising. So I'm reaching out to humbly ask you to make a donation to our people-powered movement.
I think that relationship is actually fascinating because at the beginning it seemed like President Trump was only a critic, and then they had a little bit of a bromance moment when Mondani met him in the Oval Office. So, I'm not sure that the president would necessarily highlight the contrast between the two, but I think Mondani is very happy to highlight that contrast.
We were following the evacuation of a crowd yesterday, weren't we? Who'd gathered for America's 250th anniversary celebrations. It looked at one point like the whole thing might succumb to thunderstorms. Eventually, it did go ahead, and Donald Trump delivered the speech he promised.
For 2.5 centuries, our American republic has stood as the crowning achievement of human history. This country is the home of freedom. This is the land of liberty. And this is a flag that's the banner of the most extraordinary, most exceptional, most incredible nation ever to exist on the face of the earth. And we're doing better now than we've ever done before.
Meanwhile, in New York, and sort of increasingly the face of the Democratic Party, Zoran Mondani, gave his own 4th of July speech.
Those ideals upon which our nation was built, they are strong enough to endure any authoritarian regime, but only if we reach for them. Ours is a nation working each day towards the perfection in which it was conceived. A nation striving each day to better itself. Therein lies the work of America. The striving, the bettering, the reaching towards perfection. What a privilege each of us has to live in a nation that every one of its inhabitants can shape. What a responsibility each of us possesses to prove ourselves worthy of all those who came before.
And that is Zoran Mondani speaking this week. So what do the speeches from these two men who've come to define the opposite poles of American politics tell us about this country's political direction? Jeff Mason can help us with that. He is Reuters White House correspondent and joins us from Washington tonight. Hello, Jeff. Good evening.
Hi there, good to be with you. I have to make one correction there. I am now at Bloomberg, not at Reuters, but it is good to be with you.
Congratulations, Jeff. I hadn't realised. Forgive me. And what a game for Bloomberg. Okay, what day yesterday was, Jeff? Crikey. I mean, it felt like we weren't going to get a speech at one point, but we did in the end. And it was. Let's just dive into it so far as Donald Trump is concerned, Jeff. It was much more hopeful about America than some of his previous rhetoric.
It was a mixture, that speech, I would say. It was a mixture of greatest hits for the president that he often talks about in his speeches that are sharply partisan and sharply political. but it also had in what you would consider a traditional 4th of July speech for a president, and a couple of very moving aspects or parts when he invited veterans to come onto the stage, some from World War II and other wars, and salute flags that were old and historical flags. And the president also making some broader statements about our best is yet to come. That's something you might hear from a more in a more traditional speech on such a significant day. But you can't ignore the fact that he also mixed that with the rhetoric that we have come to be accustomed to from the president, including using that bully pulpit moment to press for the Save America Act, which is a bill that would reduce or make it harder for people to vote in the United States, and also take on what he views as communism or communists on the American left.
Okay, and let's talk about Zohran Mamdani as well then, who also delivered a speech that was sort of quite, I thought it was sort of kind of similar in tone. It was quite hopeful. Zohran Mamdani has talked about America not working for everybody and the American dream in recent weeks, which has been interesting. The speech also focused more on immigration as a positive force in the 21st century America. How do you sort of reflect on his remarks?
I think it's just a contrast, and Mamdani is now certainly one of the most high-profile Democratic and specifically Democratic Socialist leaders in this country. He leads New York, which of course, I don't need to tell your listeners, is a hugely, hugely important city in this country and in the world. And he has a platform now to contrast himself with President Trump that he has used. I think that relationship is actually fascinating because at the beginning, it seemed like President Trump was only a critic, and they had a little bit of a bromance moment when Mamdani met him in the Oval Office. So, I'm not sure that the president would necessarily highlight the contrast between the two, but I think Mamdani is very happy to highlight that contrast, and that's what those speeches did.
Yeah, okay. How do we then marry them? How do we bring them together to understand, Jeff, where America is currently at its two poles?
It's a good question. I mean, look, it's my job as a reporter to cover those things and to connect the dots. It's not my job to draw conclusions from it, but the way that I would connect the dots is just to say something that we know, which is that this country is very divided. And we've seen that for years now, but it has certainly manifested itself in the last few elections, and it is manifesting itself now in this issue and in between those two men as sort of polar opposites of the left and the right. I think it's also interesting to point out that those divisions are very, very open within the two sides. So the Democratic Party, of course, is really struggling with its own divisions between the left and the more moderate side, and Mamdani represents, as do the other Democratic Socialists who were elected in primaries over the last couple of weeks, that much further left side of the party, and then there are others who are fighting to stay sort of in the middle, which is more or less where general elections, particularly big ones, are fought. On the right, you have President Trump, who really has complete dominance over the Republican Party. And yet his MAGA movement does not represent the entire Republican electorate. And so there are tensions there as well.
Okay, and if we understand in that context, Jeff, American politics and all politics really, to be about having and winning your base, and then reaching to enough people perhaps in the centre to build a broad enough coalition to become president. Mamdani himself obviously can't do that. But which of those two political visions do you think, as just, not asking you to take a view, but just from your sort of understanding of the way that American public mood and public opinion is shifting, which of those two visions has the best shot of doing that at the moment?
Let's say that last part again. Which of those two have the what?
Have the best sort of shot of being able to capture that mood and be able to sort of build that coalition, I suppose.
I appreciate the question. I don't have an answer to that. It's not. I don't think answerable to say which one has the better shot. Both of them have their own shot, and both of them have their own groups of voters that they are reaching out to. at a general election, when we get to the presidential election in another 2 years, the sweet spot is the middle. The sweet spot are the independents who don't belong to one of those parties, who will want to hear something or see something in their candidates that convinces them to vote for them in November. Right now, with the midterm elections coming up, of course, independents are also a prized voter group. But both Mandani's policies and Trump's policies have things that attract people, but also repel people. And the question is there enough anger right now in the electorate at President Trump's policies, because he, of course, is the president and not the mayor of a city, that's going to lead to a wave election of some kind?
What is happening in the United States is this battle between conservatism and this ultra-liberalism. But you can also look at it in the lens of economics. Capitalism versus communism.
For Democrats, including some of these Democratic socialists who are popping up and winning primaries.
Okay, interesting, brilliant stuff. Jeff, lovely to talk to you, my friend. Thank you so much. Always good stuff. That's Jeff Mason, who is now Bloomberg's White House and Washington correspondent, with us on Times Radio.
All right. Let's take a look at Times News interviewed Anthony Scaramucci. Why Trump keeps winning. The anger vote. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and make sure you get the clarity factor. This will help to get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate on tasks, take it every day, drink it with filtered water, and over time you're going to notice that you'll be able to think faster, have better memory. And what's happening is that you're building better connections between your neurons. And over time, you're strengthening those connections. That allows you to think faster, have the better memory, to concentrate. And again, this gets rid of that brain fog. Clarity factor you should be taking every day to help with your brain function. To help with your cardiovascular health, make sure you take omega-3 every day. Brings down inflammation, helps to control your lipid profile, and it reduces the stickiness of your red blood cells, so you're not overclotting. Omega-3 is super important to take to help with your cardiovascular health. And by having better blood flow to your brain, you're improving brain function. You're allowing your hippocampus to get the nutrients it needs to maintain those neural networks. Super important. And resveratrol. Resveratrol will get rid of cells that are in senescence, help with youthful gene expression, soak up free radicals, help to maintain healthy mitochondria, so you're going to have higher concentrations of ATP, more energy, your cells will work properly. And resveratrol helps with the basal layer with your skin, so you have healthier skin. This stacks really well with C60, especially for the basal layer. So please go to my store, make sure you get the resveratrol and the C60. To save some money, use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off. Let's listen into Scaramucci.
And you have a new book coming in.
Trump is a Shakespearean figure, and he eats his young, and so I think it'll be very hard. I don't think Trump wants either Vance or Rubio to replace him. I have said on the Rest of Politics US with Katty Kay that he doesn't want a successor from his party. He's such a narcissist that he would like to say, hey, you Republicans were nothing before I got here.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. Now, it's a big moment for the history of America, 250 years. When you look at modern America right now, how do you think the country's doing? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the country's doing okay. We've got a little bit of a K-shaped economy going on right now, which I am worried about. There's a large group of people in the country that feel the economic struggle, the affordability crisis, etc. But generally, the country's doing okay, and the economic innovation is there. to create the wealth necessary. I guess we just have to figure out the right policies to spread the wealth down into the system. The political leadership is not doing okay. I think the political leadership is actually failing the country. But the good news about America, because we've got a lot of entrepreneurs and we have a culture, more or less a risk-taking culture, we'll pull through this. But we've created a cartel now in the country. It's sort of a uniparty. It's like the Demo-Publicans or the Republicrats, and I've got a very tight stronghold on Washington. They're spending way too much money and wasting it, by the way. And it's very hard for new leadership to break in. We've got octogenarians running the country. So that part of it's not great. But generally, the United States has usually been a place over the last 250 years, despite different types of downturns and cyclicality, has pulled through, and I predict it will do that again this time.
And you have, I needed 10 sequin cowboy hats for a bachelorette party. But what did I get? What the? But then, and you have a new book coming out called All the Wrong Moves, which is very much looking at, the politics of the country, what went wrong and what could come next. Tell us about some of the big arguments that you make in your book.
Well, the interesting part about the book, it's not an indictment of Donald Trump, because all of this stuff happened prior to his arrival in the political stage. This is really a statement of bipartisan arrogance after the fall of the Berlin Wall. We got very overconfident. We got overconfident in terms of what we thought was going to happen with Russia. For some reason,
George Bush Sr., 41. He thought, and the neocons thought, that they didn't have to worry about the reaction of the Soviet Union because it was starting to fall apart. And therefore, they helped with the expansion of NATO to push further into the eastern area of Europe. And we had this hubris that our economic system is the best and that we were going to do shock therapy in Russia to get them back into a more capitalistic framework. Shock therapy was devastating for their industry, devastating for their currency. So the shock therapy, the expansion of NATO, and our hubris in the Middle East all coincided at the same time. And we were so successful during Desert Storm, it added to the hubris.
All leaders thought that the Chinese were going to move towards a democratic style form of capitalism, as opposed to the Communist Party having that stronghold on the country. And so I just point out that we made several big catastrophic decisions. One, letting China into the World Trade Organization unchecked. It really did hollow out our manufacturing centers. We went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, first time in our history with a tax cut. Every other time in history we had a major war starting, we raised taxes, we actually cut taxes. That put us on a very bad deficit trajectory. And then the third thing, and I think perhaps this is the most damning of all of them, is when we went to bail out the banks in the global financial crisis, we didn't give any money to the middle class or the working class people here in this country. And they developed movements like the Tea Party movement. They developed Occupy Wall Street. It looks like those two got together, had a baby, and created MAGA. And now we have this anger-based populism. And I think you understand this because pockets of this are happening in the UK. You have this sort of horseshoe. So left-leaning populism and right-leaning populism have a lot of the same ideas, but they're both based on economic desperation and the anger associated with it. And I just talk about how this happened and how we can pull ourselves out of it if we want. If we want to, we can pull ourselves out of it. But the current political leadership is not going to be the leadership that pulls us out of this, unfortunately. They just don't have the will for it.
I mean, I agree with so much of your analysis there, Anthony, particularly the horseshoe and the real, economic endurance test that is life for a lot of people, in so many Western economies at the moment. They feel that the system is just against them. It's really hard to just get by. It was always felt that your kids would do better than you. That doesn't feel like that's the case anymore. And yet people seem to be turning to largely, in America, Trump here in the UK, which I know you're very familiar with our politics as well, Nigel Farage. There are people who are having a really tough time economically, and yet they're turning to these very rich men who are just getting richer and richer. What do you think is going on with that disconnect with sort of working class people looking to these kind of, millionaire men to save them?
Well, listen, it's anger-based, and you have to look at it from the emotional nature that it actually is. And so the narrative sort of goes like this: your current establishment is not helping me. I'm not saying that this rich person is going to help me, but you know what they're going to do? They're going to stick a finger in your eye. And so people like Farage or Trump are shaking the establishment. And if you're not part of that club, if you're in a lower middle income area of the UK or the United States, you're like, okay, I can't get into the club, but at least these people are avatars of my anger, and they're going to smash into the people I think that have hurt me. And it's a terrible thing, but these guys are preying on that anger. They're preying on those economic disparities. And what we found, I can't really speak for Nigel Farage, but I can definitely speak for Trump. Over the last 2 terms, the 6 or so years that he's been at president, he has done nothing for those people. If you look at the big, beautiful spending bill as an example, passed last year, it provides corporate welfare, it provides tax cuts for the wealthy, but it actually takes people off the SNAP benefit programs. Those are our food programs, and it removes about 17 million people from our health care, our health insurance, the Obamacare. And so it's sort of ridiculous. They voted Trump in, and he is now doing things that are against their economic interests. So, but they stay with him because he represents their anger, and I think they cling to that, unfortunately.
So how do things change if he is very, very good at feasting on the dissatisfaction and the anger that people have? That's not going away. He, very, very good at controlling the media and the narrative. How are things going to change?
Well, one of the things I write about in the book is, unfortunately for all of us, as part of our human nature, some arrogance creeps in. And I think the president's arrogance is on full display now. He just listed a 927-page financial disclosure document. It turns out that he was buying Apple Computer, then waiting a day and then tweeting to other people to buy it, which pushed the stock up. He was selling short the markets before his announcement of the tariffs. And then he was getting long the markets or buying the markets when he was putting a reprieve on the tariffs. And I think this type of reprehensible behavior is going to really hurt him.
Wait a minute. All that trading that he did was through a blind trust or a series of investments where he wasn't dealing with the trades. He had a money manager doing it. So I think he needs to make sure that his facts are solid tight before he makes the claim that there was insider trading. Now, could there have been? Yeah, maybe. But the thing is that where's the proof? Where's the proof that he literally did insider trading instead of just having his money manager look at the mosaic of what's happening and trade the market?
And I think it's going to hurt the Republicans in midterm elections and likely in the 2028 elections. I guess what's at issue though is that the Democrats are, still fighting our culture here. Trump understands the culture better than them, and so we'll have to see how this thing unfolds. But for me, it's the current political class, and somebody like Tucker Carlson, who I know you guys know, is saying something I think quite interesting. It won't work. But he's saying, well, we have to have a third party. These two parties don't represent the interests of the Americans anymore, as evidenced by the voter registration. Just for your viewers and listeners, 43% of the Americans now have left the two parties and have registered as independents. And so when you think about that, these parties really don't represent us anymore. But because of gerrymandering and because of the things they've done operationally to tighten their hold on the system, they've become this cartel-like duopoly. And I think if we can get some political leaders in there to speak to the American people directly about what they're doing, whether it's Trump or, frankly, some of the Democratic socialists that are also populists, I think we can make some headway. The country is starving for, I think, straight-talking political leadership at this point.
It's so interesting you talk about that. I mean, we're seeing a realignment of politics here in the UK. Of course, you know we've had the two big heritage parties, Labour and the Conservatives. It feels like that's sort of been disrupted at the moment, certainly after our last set of local elections. We've got the Green Party more on the left. We have Reform, obviously, on the right. But do you think a new party could get traction in America, given the stranglehold that the big two have, the funding that's required, the sort of the media punch through? Do you think it actually would be realistic?
So it's such a great question, but I think the answer to the question is no. I think somebody's going to have to do what Trump did. And so Trump created a third party. Let's call that third party MAGA. And he effectively merged it with the old Republican Party, decapitated the old Republican Party, and installed MAGA in that party. And so that's what would have to happen again. We'd have to have a reform-based group of people that attach themselves to one of the two parties. And remember, this is something Elon Musk looked at. I'll just point this out to your viewers and listeners. There's 105 million people in the United States. It's the most powerful voting bloc.
For the ones that have been paying attention to my trades, I said that I did a long position for the S&P 500 and a short position in natural gas. I closed out the long position for today for the S&P 500. And markets have only been open for 30 minutes.
And they vote the exact same way in every single election. And that's the non-voter. And so as surprising as this sounds, we're in a democracy, but literally 51% of the eligible people above the age of 18 do not vote. And so think of that entrepreneurial opportunity for a political leader to reach into that market, try to grow the market of people that could vote, bring them into the registration pool. This is something Musk looked at. Ultimately, he was talked out of doing it by J.D. Vance, but I think that's where the potential opportunity is for reform in the United States, to wake up the apathetic people who are not part of the system in terms of voting, and see if we can get them back into the swimming pool.
That sounds like that's a job for the mooch.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm running for re-election in my marriage. I'm just trying to.
but who are there voices like that? Are there, charismatic political people who are great orators? They connect well with people. They're super articulate. They speak the language of everyday people. Are there people that you see that we don't know about over here?
Well, here's what I would say. There's a lot of young people that are less ideological than the Mondanis or the J.D. Vances or the AOCs or the Marco Rubios. And, it may not be in this next election cycle, frankly, but I do think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see those types of people emerge. Listen, we've got a very old...
You may find individuals slightly right of center or left of center that are moderate, that have some sort of moderation. But first, you got to battle between the communists and the capitalists. You have to battle between this idea of the conservatives versus the left-wing wingnuts of the Democratic Party. The question is, who will win on the battlefield, the political battlefield? The Enlightenment or the relativists, the postmodern relativists? And once that's all settled, then, the coast is clear, the battlefield is clear, and then the moderates can come in and say that they're going to make a more perfect union. But the reality is that there needs to be conflict, and if you're a conservative, you're going to need to push back on these communists. The conservative person is aligned with the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is aligned with capitalism. It's not aligned with postmodernism. It's not aligned with relativism. It's not aligned with communism. It's matter and antimatter. They can't be together, or they annihilate. We won't have a country. So the ultra-liberals are going to have to lose. Because if they win, you no longer have capitalism. You no longer have a constitutional republic. They want a one-party system where it's you don't have recourse. They don't believe in property rights. So wake up, America. But it's going to start before the moderates come onto the scene in the 10 years that he thinks it's going to happen. There has to be a battle. There has to be conflict between the conservative movement and the ultra-liberal movement.
Statement, this is just an objective statement. We have a very elderly electoral class here. If you look at whether it's Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, Chuck Grassley, Donald J. Trump, these are all 80-plus-year-old people that are in senior leadership positions inside the country. And I think it's time for new blood, And for me, when I'm thinking new blood, I'm not thinking me in my 60s. I'm thinking about people that are in their 40s. I certainly want to be helpful to those people, that's for sure.
And look, final couple of questions to you. What do you think comes after Trump? Do you think he will stand down at the end of this term? Do you think the Republicans can win again? Is it going to be J.D. Vance that comes next?
I think it'll be very hard for Vance. I think it'll be very hard for Vance. I think Trump is a Shakespearean figure, and he eats his young, and so I think it'll be very hard. I don't think Trump wants either Vance or Rubio to replace him. I have said on the Records of Politics U.S. with Katty Kay that he doesn't want a successor from his party. He's such a narcissist that he would like to say, hey, you Republicans were nothing before I got here. You'll be nothing after I leave. And just think about what he does to the Republican Party in terms of going after existing established Republicans by having the primary and so forth. So I think it'd be very hard for those two. Having said that, what the Republicans have going for them are the Democrats. They're very disparate. They're fighting with each other. And, people are not going to like me saying this, but the Democrats are off the mark on the American culture. The culture of wokeism is not where the Americans live. And I just want to point out that AOC herself, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, after Election Day in 2024, she took her pronoun designation off her X or Twitter feed. And when she was asked why, she said, well, a lot of my constituents voted for Donald Trump. They also voted for me. I said, well, why did you split your vote like that? And they said, well, we don't like the culture. We don't like the direction you guys are taking the culture. So I would just implore my Democratic friends to be careful here. A lot of people dislike President Trump, but they don't like that aspect of the culture where the Democrats are trying to drive things. And so it's going to be a lot closer than people think as a result.
It's beyond the wokeism. It's beyond the wokeism. Many people in the Democratic Party that are young and aligned to this ultra-liberalism want to destroy the Constitution. They don't believe in the constitutional republic that we have. They want to destroy this country. So it's not just wokeism. The wokeism is tied to oppressor and oppressed and demonize whites and all that stuff. Change the language, but it gets to what gets to the heart of the issue. He doesn't bring up. Only I keep on bringing this up. I don't hear anyone else saying this. It's about the Enlightenment. It's about life, liberty, and property rights. It's about a constitutional republic where there's balances of powers between the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The ultra-left wants to destroy those pillars of government. But not just that. They want to destroy and supplant the Enlightenment with postmodernism, relativism, anything goes. And when you do that, you're eroding God, country, and family. You're eroding religion. You're eroding patriotism and the ability to protect the land. They believe in open borders, these ultra-libs. Well, how do you have a country if you have just open borders? They think everything's going to be kumbaya. You just let everyone in unfettered. What about terrorists? What about letting in a certain culture faster than the host culture can absorb? Oh, with postmodernism, it's okay. Anything goes. That's not the Enlightenment. And then they want to destroy family. Just keep on having those abortions. Yeah, 1972. Since 1972, close to 70 million abortions, 72 million fetuses. Now, some of these abortions, some of these killing of the fetuses were necessary in terms of medical issue, in terms of maybe incest, rape, but they are not the norm. The far majority of the abortions, the fetus killing, has been due to socioeconomic reasons. So 70 million. So they want more. They want more of the abortions. They want more of the fetal tissue to be expunged. They want to kill the family. Then they want to erode your First Amendment and your Second Amendment. They want to have DEI. They don't want a meritocracy. Now, what I believe is if you got the chops, then you should be elevated in society. But if you don't have the chops, sorry. Everyone is created equal, but not everyone ends in the same socioeconomic status. That's through hard work, luck, and a lot of other variables. The end is not equal. The start at once you're born, we are created equal. And the whole reason why our founding fathers had that in the Declaration of Independence was to state there's no, quote, king sovereign over their subjects, that everyone born, including a king, is equal. That's what it meant. Now, after the Civil War, the zeitgeist changed and we reinterpreted what those words really meant. But the reason why Jefferson wrote it in the Declaration of Independence was to state that all men, mankind, is created equal and is not subservient to a king. That's what it meant. But we got to change the meaning because of the zeitgeist. But with the current zeitgeist, we do not end in the same place because it's about taking risks. And with taking risks, there's the unknown. But with the liberals, the ultra liberals, they think that the end has to be equal. No, that's not how it works, especially in a capitalistic society. So, Scaramucci, he's not getting to the essence of the issue here. The essence is about the Enlightenment. We're talking about things that are going all the way back to the 1700s. This idea of life, liberty, and property. But also in the Enlightenment, it was scientific discovery, not being anchored down by some sort of religious power telling you that the earth is the center of the universe. But through scientific discovery, that a wider world is discovered and known. And further knowledge is just over the horizon. And it's not static, this knowledge. It's dynamic. That's part of the Enlightenment. When you're talking about this postmodernism in our politic and in our sciences, anything goes. Oh, the earth is flat, but the earth is round. And all. When you have art coming out of a certain philosophy and it's garbage, don't you think that the same thing's going to happen with its psychology of that philosophy? Its political persuasions will be garbage too. Tell me what really is coming out of postmodernism that was actually good. Barack Obama's architecture is postmodern architecture. Can you honestly say that that's great architecture? It's not. But Barack Obama is part of this postmodern ethic, this postmodern philosophy. That's why it's so important to get to the point. It's beyond just wokeism. It's beyond just blue-haired bitches with bones in their nose. It's about the erosion of the Enlightenment, the erosion of God, country, and family. And this country, and we just went through the 250th anniversary of the founding of our nation, is anchored to the Enlightenment, not postmodernism.
And look, final question to you, Anthony. We are on the brink of getting a new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester. What do you think how do you think he should navigate his relationship with Trump? I mean, Keir Starmer both received praise, but then criticism for sort of really, trying to ingratiate himself to Donald Trump. And in the end,
First of all, they're going to replace, in Britain, they're going to replace one dipshit for another dipshit. It's not going to go well. It's not going to go well. The country in Britain, they need to get their act together and shed this socialism. They're not as dynamic of a society as the United States. Now, what is very interesting, if you read I think it's Goodspeed. Is it Goodspeed? No, I'll look up the author. But he just wrote a book. I just finished reading it just about 2 months ago about why recessions happen. He did his Ph.D. under Niall Ferguson, so he's a historian, but economic historian. Great book, and he has a bunch of charts showing the dynamism between the United States and Britain, and how certain epochs, while the British were more stagnant, they may not have had as many volatility waves in its economy. While in the United States, because we're more dynamic and more entrepreneurial and taking more risks, a larger economy, that there's more volatility. But I'm broad brushing these statements because I have to look at the book in detail to the charts, because he has an interesting argument. But the big takeaway from his book is that you can't determine when a recession is going to happen. It's somewhat of a chaotic, indeterministic event because there's so many different variables. Now, some countries may do better than others depending on what the buffer systems are. How much of a shock absorber do you have? Like driving a car, if you have a good shock absorber over a bad road, you don't feel the bad road very well. But if you don't have any shock absorbers, you're going to feel the road really in the road that you feel is very intense. So the main point that I'm making here is the British need to realize that they had an empire because of the spread of capitalism and the networks of capital around the world, and a strong navy to be able to support it. This is the reason why the United States has to have a strong navy, make sure that maritime law is protected and freedom of navigation, and to have a system of government that is aligned with capitalism. When you have a system of government that's not aligned with capitalism, you're going to be more socialistic, and that socialism is going to erode and make you less productive. That's what's happening in Britain. What does Britain make? Fish and chips? I mean, really, honestly, what does Britain make? Tourism for the monarchy and fish and chips. So they were a strong empire. They made they used to be a major manufacturer of textiles. No longer. That's no longer. That's gone. New York used to be a major manufacturer of textiles. That's gone too. But we in the United States, as long as we stay true to that North Star of the Enlightenment and in capitalism, we will do fine. But I fear that the British have already lost their way with their North Star, and that they keep on bringing in this whole socialism stuff. They have to shed the social programs, and they have to reignite their identity. They have a vast history. They need to reignite that identity. Instead of opening up the borders and destroying London and destroying the country. Now, the ultra-liberals that are happening in the United States, they want to do something similar. They want to open up the borders and destroy the culture. Now, let's face it, America is more aligned with ketchup than salsa. The United States, it's Heinz ketchup and not salsa.
What's your advice to our new Prime Minister?
Well, listen, I've said repeatedly, he only respects strength. He doesn't respect weakness. He doesn't like the people that are overly obsequious with him. People think, oh, he likes that. He really doesn't like it. He laughs at it. He thinks those people are kowtowing to him, and he snickers about it. And even in the book Regime Change, he was showing text messages from Jeff Bezos fawning over him, or from Mark Zuckerberg, and he was doing that with a high level of derision. So I would say to your future prime minister, pick up the phone and call Mark Carney. Have him be your life coach for a few weeks. Nobody understands Trump better in Western leadership than Mark Carney. And be tough when you need to be tough. President Trump, that's really the only thing that he respects. If you fawn over him, you'll do that, and it'll
now let's get this straight. Mark Carney is a globalist. Mark Carney is well-heeled. Well-heeled. Mark Carney is actually destroying the relationship between the United States and Canada. Now, how does a Canadian actually run the Bank of England? Well, I understand they're a commonwealth and blah, blah, blah. That boy is well connected. Probably better connected than Trump is. But the thing is that he aligned with the globalists. Now, the United States, they got one foot with the globalists and they got another foot with, more of a nationalistic mentality. The business of the United States is business. All right? But that doesn't mean globalism. It just means business. It means what's best for us, the United States. Not what's best for the globalists. They're two totally different things that sometimes they align. But many times they don't. And the globalists have a hissy fit whenever you have a president that has leadership that is pushing back on the globalists. The United States is pioneering and risk-taking. We lead, we don't follow. Now, if it means shedding some of that globalism to reach to the next frontier, so be it. And the reality of the situation is that lots of these countries, especially Canada, needs the United States. Now, militarily, the United States can take Canada. And maybe we should. We sure as hell should have them as a state or a series of states. Maybe each of their territories should be a state in the United States. Same thing with Greenland. I'm an America First expansionist, not an America First pacifist. But in terms of Carney, he's a well-heeled globalist, and he's right in line with George Soros.
Look, a great pleasure to speak with you, Anthony. Thank you so much for your time.
Guys. Thank you for having me, and happy 4th of July. I'm sorry that we're such traitors, but we are a rebellious group of people over here on this side of the pond.
The revolutionaries that founded this country, that fought during the revolution for the United States, or for the colonies at the time, we're not traitors. Now, the British think we're traitors. Okay. Before we go to the next video, the S&P 500 is at 7,526. For the ones that were listening at the early of this session, I put in a position longing the S&P 500, and I put in positions shorting natural gas. Right now, natural gas is at 3.231. I think that natural gas fair value is around 3.1, maybe 3. And the S&P 500 is trading at 7,526. I think the long-term year-end, not long-term, but year-end is around 7,800 to 8,000 for the S&P 500. But I'm doing these tactical trades. I put the trade in at the beginning of, or just before the session. It was in pre-market, and I closed it out within 30 minutes after the market opened. I'm still in the short position for the natural gas. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you listen to me, you'll make some money in the market, understand what's going on in the news, my perspective. I have a very strong pattern recognition cortex in my brain. I don't know why, I just was born that way. But when I see a pattern, you better pay attention, because it'll probably give you some insight. Now, I have supplements that I take every day to help slow down the aging process. I've been doing this for a very long time, going all the way back to when I was 16 years old. Why? Because I saw a lot of deaths in my family because of heart disease. Now, Fast forward now, technology, understanding sports medicine and geriatric medicine and the aging process, new supplementation, how to stack them, understanding all the metabolic pathways and the biochemistry, that over time helped me to tweak this protocol that I have. Now, if you pay attention, it will slow down the aging process, and it's cost effective, right? I do it every day. Now, vitamin C and magnesium is a dual purpose supplement. You want to get dual purpose supplements because you get more bang for your buck. Now, vitamin C and magnesium will boost up your immune system. Everyone knows that. But it'll also help to improve your dermal layer for your skin. It cross-links with collagen if you drink filtered water. So the filtered water with the vitamin C and the collagen will cross-link to improve your dermal layer. Very important. And vitamin C with magnesium will help with your brain function. Magnesium is very important for brain function. You have to pay attention to me because I know the subject matter really well. There are too many people not taking enough magnesium to help with their brain function. They may be taking enough magnesium at the FDA recommended level, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to do FDA recommendation. We're trying to slow down the aging process and stop dementia or reduce the chances of you getting dementia. So you're going to have to up the dosage. Now, magnesium and zinc, this is going to help boost up that immune system and help with brain function. You can stack them together. Stack them together. This is going to help with your immune system and brain function, but also your dermal layer. But taking magnesium is really important to help with your brain function. You're going to notice that you're going to be thinking better, that you're sleeping better. You're getting rid of that brain fog. You're improving those dendritic connections. People that have poor blood flow, lack of magnesium, low musculature, these are all things that can lead to early onset of dementia. Dr. Paul Cottrell, how do muscles improve your brain function? Simple. One, by improving your leg muscles, you're improving venous flow to your heart. So your heart will pump better. So that means that better blood flow to your brain. But more importantly, the more musculature you have, up to a certain point, but if you have decent musculature, you're going to be able to improve the concentrations of your myokines and your BDNF, which are neuroprotective. So you're getting better blood flow to the brain, and you're protecting the neurons. See, if you just pay attention, you'll do okay. Now, another great stack is the following. But you can take them separately, but I highly recommend you stacking them. Ashwagandha root controls your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. By controlling your cortisol level, you're helping your immune system. By controlling your blood glucose levels, you're reducing damage at the vascular level. Now, it's not just the vascular level outside of the brain cavity. It's also improving your brain and the vascular system of the brain. So ashwagandha root, super important to take. Lignans helps the immune system and your endocrine system, brings down inflammation, soaks up free radicals. Turmeric brings down inflammation, soaks up free radicals. What you'll notice is when you work out by taking turmeric or lignans, you're recovering quicker. But here's the magic. You stack them together, all right? This is a very powerful way to boost up that immune system, help with your endocrine system, help with your cardiovascular system, help with brain function. Why? Because you're soaking up those free radicals, you're bringing down inflammation so the neurons are healthier. Now, you can pay attention to me or not pay attention to me. I honestly don't care. But if you do pay attention to me, you will get healthy and you will slow down the aging process. And by paying attention, you won't be so dependent on pharmacopoeia when you get older. It's up to you. It's up to you. I'm just telling you how to make some money in the market by listening to the news and how to get healthy. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and make sure you use discount 5. Discount 5 will allow you to save $5 on any order. You can use it as many times as you want. I want for people in the United States to get healthy, because a healthy population means a more productive society. It also means a society that won't be so reliant on social programs like healthcare. You want to reduce healthcare in the United States by hundreds of billions of dollars? Get healthy by a holistic approach. Proper diet, proper exercise. Most diseases in the United States, the big ones, most people that have disease like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancers, most of it is self-induced. Now there are cases where they're not. But most of the big diseases in the United States, the ones that really suck up all the funds in healthcare, are self-induced. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, path of least resistance, the oil warning investors cannot ignore.
The world didn't just show up like this. It was built.
Futures this morning, right now, after the 4th of July holiday, the Dow has actually turned negative just within the last hour. But again, 3-day holiday, markets back open. S&P is up by 29. Nasdaq's on fire this morning, 329. Now, stocks closed mixed last week. The Dow posted a new record high after jumping nearly 600 points during the session. The Nasdaq dropped though. Semiconductor stocks did face another sell-off. That was on Thursday. Now let's look to today, because chip makers are getting a bounce this morning. Investors are pouring money back into technology, it looks like. Let's bring in Slate-Stone Wealth Partner and Chief Market Strategist Kenny Polcari. Kenny, good morning. What are you watching?
What are you watching? Well, it's going to be the start of earnings season next week, so you get yourself prepared for that, right? Because we've gone through kind of the end of the quarter. We've gone through that rotation. We're going to continue to see rotation. I'm not surprised at what you say where the NASDAQ is up today, kind of getting beaten up last week, again, with more rotation money out of tech into broader sectors, utilities, industrials, basic materials. Healthcare all saw gains last week on the back of that rotation out of tech. But look, tech's getting to a place where, once again, it's getting to an oversold position. We're coming into earnings. There is opportunity there. So I'm just keeping my eyes open, but I'm going to be cautious going into the earnings season next week.
All right, because Bank of America kicks off things. JP Morgan Chase is kicking off things end of next week. To your point, we also get inflation data coming next week. All of that is on the table. But I want to talk about oil with you and with Ryan Payne, because let's look at these contracts right now. So you've got Brent and WTI. You've got $71 and change on Brent, $68.23 on WTI.
Right. Okay, so wait, let me just pause the video and give you my little 2 cents with oil. So it's trading at this moment at 68.85. It's above the resistance level, the recent resistance level of 68.78. So you have a fib sequence that was a resistance level. Today it's testing it. It's bouncing around, going a little bit below, a little bit above, right? So if it stays above that resistance level of 68.78, you're going to have a trading range of around 68.78 to about 74. Now, oil is kind of slowly trying to tick back up, but I think what's going to happen is it will creep up to 70, 71, 72, and then come back down, retest this 68, 78 fail, or retest it and break through, and then And that's 68, 78 support level is now going to be a resistance level, and then there'll be a trading range that's closer to probably 67 to 69. There's probably that kind of little bit of a trading range, but it all is predicated on what happens in the Middle East. If there's going to be further conflict, then it's going to start trading back up into the high 70s, maybe even the low 80s. But today, it's testing that 68, 78 fib sequence. Is it going to be a resistance level, or will it be a support level? I suspect the way the movement is that by the end of today's trading, we may actually turn into a support level, and that will be creeping back up to about 70, 71, 72.
Fox this morning that 6 vessels have crossed the strait so far today. 5 have exited. Oil tankers also passing through the strait near Oman's coast yesterday after several vessels made unexplained U-turns over the weekend. OPEC and allies agreed to raise production by nearly 188,000 barrels a day. That's in August. Kepler is recording about 30 to 60 vessels crossing the strait on average every day. And then, of course, you've got the Iranian-U.S. talks, which are on pause right now because Tehran is holding a funeral for its former supreme leader. Kenny, I want to get your reaction because we had James Yorio on with us in the 6 a.m. hour. We asked him about oil and his prediction about oil. Listen to what he told us.
The only thing that seems like truth is the price of crude itself. They look at it, $68 a barrel. It's only about $8 or $9 ahead of where it was before this conflict started. So to me, the market is saying this thing is 98% done. And to the general's point, that last 2% could be consequential if something flares up again. So there still should be a bit of a risk premium in crude. However, I think in the middle of next year, crude's going to be at about $45 a barrel. And I think we're already starting to see the reasons why. UAE has increased production. OPEC then increases production to keep their market share.
But the problem here, I don't think it's going to be trading at 45, because if you look historically at that 40, 45 level, what happens is as a feedback and new production gets shut down because it's not cost effective. So you have that issue. But they're pumping more, one, because they need to get market share because OPEC is basically breaking apart slowly. UAE decided to leave OPEC. So they need to get market share. They also lost revenues because of the clog of the Strait of Hormuz. So they need to pump and get it out there. But also reserves, our strategic reserve, the reserve in Japan, the reserves in Europe, they need to be refilled. So that creates a demand. And when that's creating a demand, the price is going to be, even though production is going up, yes, he's right about the supply side of this. But what about the demand side? The demand is actually going to be a little bit higher because these countries need to fill up their strategic reserves. So I think what's going to happen is that we're back to where we were before, where we're trading at a $56, $57 range, maybe going like to 56 to about $60 back and forth. But I don't believe it's going to go to 40 or 45, because if you look historically, it doesn't stay down that long, and then it pops back up because there's this negative feedback loop. So I think that there's a higher probability of being in the $55 to $60 range than the $40 or $45 range. It's just not cost effective for many oil producers at a $45 to $50 range for very long. They can do it for a little while. They can do it for maybe 2 months, 3 months, maybe, but this is not sustainable. So if you see short term a $50 or $45 barrel of oil for WTI, that's time to buy. That's time to long oil and just load up the long positions, waiting for it to creep up. Now you may have to wait for 2.5 months or whatever, but the thing is that it's definitely going to go back up to a equilibrium of approximately $56 to about $60 a barrel. The guy's wrong.
What do you think of that, Kenny?
Listen, I'm in the same camp as Jimmy, right? I think oil's going lower. I think, we're going to see the low 60s fairly soon. 45 might be aggressive next year, but I got to kind of think about how that's all playing out. But I definitely think the path of least resistance is down and not up. And so I fully suspect that, the country's going to benefit really because we're going to see oil prices, like I said, get down into the low 60s, which is where they were right prior to the invasion, right? Where they go beyond that is going to depend on how much this production gets ramped up, how much UAE wants to join. Are they going to let Iran really start selling that much more oil? How much more supply is coming to the market? So yes, I think Jimmy's right. I'm not sure it's 45, but I certainly think it's lower from here.
Not to speak for Ryan Payne, but I do want to bring him into the conversation. He had the same reaction. But, Ryan, the Journal writes this morning, a sudden glut of oil threatens to weaken Iran's hand in talk. So the supply is out there.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you got to think about there's a lot of making up for lost profits, right? If you're Iran right now, if you're OPEC plus, like there's a lot of oil you want to get to the market because you have those revenues to replace. Right. And also the UAE, which is not an OPEC plus anymore. They're going to be doing their own decisions when it comes to oil production. So I think that's going to ramp up as well. So I think, to Ken's point here, oil glut in the short term, I can see it dropping to low 60s. $45 a barrel might be a little Pollyannish. I also think that because global growth is going up, so oil demand should go up with that. Also, oil security is going to be a problem if you're Japan. Do you want all your oil coming through the Strait of Hormuz, or 80-90%? So you may be rerouting some of that. And oil companies as well got burnt during fracking when oil prices were too low, made no money. So there's going to be a lot of, I would say, profits over production that will probably keep a floor under oil prices. And I'm with you, Ken. I think it's closer to $60 a barrel. I don't think it's 45. I wish it was, but I don't think that's where it's going.
Yeah, but 60 would be, the 60's not 100, to be clear. Hey, Kenny, I want to look at yields with you really fast because we're looking ahead to a lot of data, but we're going to get the Fed minutes on Wednesday. And this is Kevin Warsh's first meeting as Fed chair. We've also got CPI out next Tuesday. June PPI retail sales are Thursday. And then, of course, second quarter bank earnings are kicking off. What are you watching?
So look, I think bond yields are telling you that it's still unsure. I think what it's saying is that yields aren't going up, but nor are they, rates aren't going up, but nor are rates at the moment going to go down, right? I know the meeting's at the end of the month. There's a lot of data between now and the end of the month, so that story could change. But I think it's kind of set in that he's gonna hold rates steady at the moment, and then we're gonna go through another month of August and into September before the next meeting where they're really gonna decide. But even then, I have to be careful because the September meeting is only 5 weeks in front of the midterm elections. I'd be very surprised if Kevin Ward were going to change policy that close to the election, because then he'll be accused of being partisan, right? And so I think you have to be very careful here. I think rates remain unchanged, and I think that's what they're going to be until after the midterms.
Interesting. Kenny Bokhari, it's always great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right, thanks, Kenny.
Always a pleasure to see you.
All right, you too, sir.
Take the next step with
Let's jump to Bloomberg here.
Of the United States to keep the Strait of Hormuz open once a durable peace settlement is in place. So essentially, the goal will be to avoid such a blow-up and also try to get some common language on key priorities such as Ukraine and rearming the European continent.
So avoiding a blow-up makes sense, but that might be difficult given that the president wanted Europe to support his war in Iran and has long memory and will surely bring that up. I think implicit in all of this is there's a or else kind of secondary effect to all of this. What is the or else part of it here, Antonio? Could the president unilaterally pull the U.S. out of NATO?
No, it's actually, as a matter of fact, this international treaty, so it would be tough for him to do so unilaterally. But he can do other things to undermine NATO. And to a certain extent, some people could claim that he has already. He has withdrawn key military assets from the European region. He has withdrawn troops. He has ordered a review of the U.S. defense posture in the region. So that's one of the main concerns of European leaders that are in NATO, that essentially the US can pull troops and assets too quickly, not leaving enough time for European countries to actually fill that gap, to develop the capabilities that they need to actually take care of its own security. As a matter of fact, that's what the US wants, for Europe to take care more of its own security, but also to deter Russia and Vladimir Putin.
So where are the European countries in terms of meeting the commitment to 3.5% of GDP, maybe even a 5% aspirational goal for defense spending? Are they making inroads there?
Look, I've been saying for a long time that the problem with this kind of spending targets is that they are a distraction, because spending target doesn't tell you anything about the ability of a country to defend itself. It really depends on how countries actually spend the money, the capabilities, how can they defend themselves together, and essentially about the strategy that those countries have to actually come together and to deter other countries from attacking them. So, I mean, in terms of the progress, some countries are making a lot of progress. Germany, as a lot of people know, has gone to great lengths to actually spend a lot of money in the last year or so, even to the point of withdrawing a key limitation in its constitution to be able to borrow more to actually pay for that spending. Poland is already at a very high levels, but then you have other countries that have made a huge effort, like Spain, for example, which was around 1.2% of GDP, has gone up to 2%. But our impression is that countries are not going to hit those targets because they are unrealistic. Also because many of these countries have fiscal constraints, very high debt levels, very high public spending. So the issue is what Trump does next. Like in the terms of the effort, it has been there. But
NATO can't do their 5% target, the European countries, because the United States with other presidents, didn't push back on Europe to make sure that they paid their fair share. And because money is fungible, they decided to spend on social programs for their country, their different countries, and they spent it differently. Germany spent their social welfare some way compared differently than the French. But the bottom line is this: the countries decided not to pay their fair share for so long and spent the money on their society for education, for healthcare, for retirement, whatever it was, infrastructure. So in essence, the United States subsidized Germany, France, Britain, Poland, Italy, Spain. We can go on. Hungary. We subsidized them. And now they say that they can't do it because they are so indebted, because they took debt for their social programs on top of not paying their fair share in NATO. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. Now, what the bond vigilante should do is really jack up those interest costs for Europe. Really push the pain so severely that they shut down the social programs. But the bondholders are afraid that these countries will just not pay the bondholders their interest, their coupon payment. They may just go default. But what really needs to happen is a market mechanism that forces the Europeans to get fiscally responsible. Now, how does that apply to the United States? The United States also needs a little bit of pain in the bond market so our government stops paying these social programs that we can't afford. But in terms of relative strength, between a comparative analysis between the United States and the European nations, the United States is far better off on our debt load than they are, by far. We're a more dynamic economy than they are. Now, you're going to start hearing in the news that as their bond yields go up, you're going to start hearing, we need to invest out of America and into Europe. And so what they're going to do is they're going to take a perspective of, well, they can borrow money from Japan and invest it into Europe and do that carry trade, or just take a look at the yields. The yields will be much higher in Europe because the bond prices will be higher. So you're going to lock in a yield relative to the United States, and they move money from the United States to Europe and do the carry trade there. But there's more of a differential between Japan and Europe versus the United States and Europe. But you're going to hear these individuals borrow money in the United States, especially when the Federal Reserve starts to lower rates. Borrow money in the United States and move it to Europe. Take my advice. These clowns that are doing the carry trade and the movement of hot money into Europe, just write this down. Never, never, never bet against the United States, ever in your life. You will always fail if you do that. Never. And that solves 40% of investing problems. All right, we're going to go to the rise, the hill. There shows the rising, and Robbie is talking about J.D. Vance, and looks like J.D. Vance is rejecting Milton Friedman. I don't know. We'll listen and see his take on that. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get a good probiotic. You can get it in powdered form or the VeggieCap form. Either one, take it every day. And what this will do is improve your gut biome. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients more efficiently. You're going to be able to boost up that immune system in your gut. You're going to be able to increase the mucosal layer, reduce food allergies. A lot of people don't realize a lot of food allergies is due to poor gut. Reduce leaky gut syndrome. Also, with a good gut biome, you're going to improve your skin and your sleep pattern. With better sleep, you're going to be able to detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and be well rested. So your brain function improves when you have a good gut biome. So take the probiotics, take them every day, and make sure that you are sleeping properly to get the added benefits. But with a good gut biome, you're going to get into a better sleep pattern. You'll notice that when you populate your gut properly, you're going to get into those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the VeggieCap version or the powdered version. And make sure that you drink filtered water and stay away from processed foods, because a lot of these processed foods, they do damage to the gut lining. And over time, the gut isn't as healthy. So please, go to my store and get the probiotics. Now, digestive enzyme complex helps to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids to allow you to absorb more efficiently. And it reduces the load on your pancreas. This is really important if you're 40 years of age or older. Why? Your pancreas doesn't function as well, so you don't want to be a Steve Jobs. People that die from pancreatic cancer is really bad, all right? And there are a lot of people in the United States that have pancreatitis, a disease of the pancreas. So drink filtered water, stay away from processed foods, stay away from sugary foods, reduce alcohol consumption, and take the digestive enzyme complex. This is going to reduce the load on your pancreas. This is going to help to break up the carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Now, digestive enzyme complex also has bromelain in it. Bromelain helps to break up clots. It's an enzyme that's really important to break up clots. And the digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to help to break up glycoproteins, which is really important during the cold season. So it's a dual purpose supplement. Take it right before you eat to help break up your food. So please go to my store, take up my advice. Digestion is super important. Super important. Probiotics and the digestive enzyme complex. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
What if you could clean your retainer at the touch of a button? No more brushing or tablets. Over 4 years ago, our team of engineers knew there had to be a quicker.
What does J.D. Vance believe, and what direction will he take the nation if he is ever elected president in his own right? Now, I, for one, am a little bit worried about his viability as the next leader of the GOP, particularly because he seems too enamored with faulty left-wing thinking on the economy. What do I mean by that? Well, the time when the Democratic Party is being conquered from within by actual socialists, even outright communists like Lisa Avila Chevalier, Mamdani acolyte who simps for Soviets and terrorists, one might expect the Republican Party to capitalize on this strategic error and campaign against it. Unfortunately, President Donald Trump continues to espouse an economic policy that itself contains, in my view, far too many concessions to socialism. Even worse, the most likely inheritor of Trump's throne is someone who is, if anything, considerably to the president's left on economics. Not on other things, but on economics. Vance rarely misses an opportunity to make crystal clear his embrace of progressive economics.
I never trust J.D. Vance. I much prefer Rubio as the potential candidate for the Republican Party for the presidency. I do not trust J.D. Vance, but I much prefer J.D. Vance than a blue-haired liberal.
Is more ideological and deeply held than Trump's. In an interview last week with Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, Vance took entirely unnecessary shots at the legendary economist Milton Friedman, whose laissez-faire economic ideas were implemented by previous generations of conservatives to great success. Vance begins by laughing at and defending Trump's previous comments about seizing the profits of AI companies. It seems clear that Vance is, well, again, more committed to this idea than Trump is, even though it's well in keeping with proposals from Democratic socialists like Senator Bernie Sanders. Vance understands better than Trump that such a proposal contradicts long-held GOP economic dogma, and that's precisely what he likes about it. He likes that it's kind of socialist. You think I'm being unfair? Vance goes on to advocate the shunning of Friedman, telling Knowles that the Republican Party of the future will enjoy spitting on his legacy. He specifically says the party will consciously eschew Friedman-style economics in favor of centralized government-controlled economic planning. What? He says this is necessary because it's fundamentally about the dignity of the human person. The economy is a tool to service the dignity of the human person. If a set of economic policies makes it possible to raise a family, to earn a living wage, to give back to the community, to maybe go to church on Sunday or to actually spend some leisure time.
I think what is happening with the Democratic Party, they're pushing communism and the control of the means of production. They state it. I mean, the Democratic Socialists of America state that almost every day. Now, with the Republican Party, there's this crony capitalism that's taking place, where there's subsidies for certain industries, there's an over heavily investment into certain industries like AI. There's a military component to it with biologics, right? So you have this overinvestment. They're tied to DARPA. That's a problem. But we also have to have spectral dominance when it comes to warfare. So it's a coin. You know, there's some overinvestment by the government for spectral dominance, but there's this kind of crony capitalism that's also taking place here. When it comes to the chips, pure capitalism is, they don't care about the nation and its military prowess. So you have to get it into the orbit to make sure that our military industrial complex is strong. We don't want NVIDIA selling chips to China that may accelerate their AI endeavors because of the military application that could be involved here. So pure capitalism doesn't care about what the ramifications may be. And it could take down a country in a, quote, pure capitalistic way, where the CEOs don't care in terms of what they design, what they sell, who they sell it to, how it affects the host country. So there's a problem there. But I'm concerned with the Republican Party doing more of this crony capitalism and as we move towards a war with China, using war powers to actually control the means of production. And what happens is that when the Republicans are doing that, the Democrats, when they get into power, will just piggyback on that momentum and further maintain control, get more control of the means of production. That's scary. That's very scary. So Robbie has a point here that the Republican Party is at this juncture promoting this crony capitalism under the disguise of it's for spectral dominance, it's for military, it's for the United States having the industrial power to maintain military prowess.
And building the kind of life that matters, that is the sort of thing we want to be supportive of, end quote. Let's watch the full clip.
If you turn economic development into a sort of idol, then you end up sacrificing a lot of the things that matter most. And I do think that, you know, for our friends who are sort of on the more laissez-faire side of the American right, in hindsight, part of why Milton Friedman's ideas made more sense in the 1980s is because they were being advocated in a country that still had a very rich and powerful institutional Christianity.
Positing that free markets are somehow antithetical to human dignity is explicitly progressive framing. Sanders, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and these new far-left radicals likely to join the House of Representatives next year, they would not have worded that statement any differently. And to say that we can only enjoy free markets if we remain a Christian nation is backward. Free markets create prosperity. They are good policy regardless of how Christian or not Christian the nation is or is becoming. One can't help but wonder why Vance thinks this pivot to the left is a good idea for the party. Friedman was the lodestar of former President Ronald Reagan and British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, two political figures.
They're trying to get the low-hanging fruit of some of the liberals that aren't ultra-liberals, some of the liberals to perhaps vote for the Republican Party, especially during the midterm election. That's the reason why that J.D. Vance is flip-flops. Don't trust him. I don't believe that J.D. Vance has a strong North Star. I could be wrong, but I just don't believe that he has a strong North Star. Now, should we have watered down socialism? No, we shouldn't have watered down socialism, because what happens is that once the Republican Party loses control of the legislature and the executive branch, what's going to happen is that they're going to piggyback on that watered down socialism and make it concentrated socialism. Now, the question is how do you improve the well-being of individuals, especially if they are supplanted because of AI? We are moving into an unknown territory when it comes to humanoid robots, artificial intelligence, the job market. Now, looking at this from a scholarly level, I believe that aggregate demand will diminish, and that there will be the short term where certain individuals will benefit because of this asymmetry of information and being able to manipulate the AI, on top of capitalists that have invested in this AI infrastructure. They'll make a lot of money. certain corporations will reduce costs and they'll have a better bottom line. Wall Street will reward them for it, and their stock price will go up. But when more companies do this, more people will be working less hours. When you work less hours, they won't pay you as much. And what will happen is that people will have to downgrade their society. They're going to have to buy smaller homes, rent smaller places, not do vacations. They're going to have to reduce their spending. And a lot of the debt that they have is anchored. So it's going to take time for them to pay it down unless they go bankrupt. And you may have large bankruptcies to try to absolve this debt because people in the aggregate are working less. The job prospects are less because more companies are reducing human labor. So aggregate demand for goods and services will go down. And eventually what will happen is that the sales for these companies will start to go down. Wall Street will start to signal a recession. It becomes more deflationary. If you have property, the value of property will go down. And the only ones that are really going to make money during this period of time that I'm mentioning, where there is the sell-off in the market, are the ones that are shorting. The traders. The traders, the transnational capitalists, are going to look at this and they're going to smell blood in the water and they're going to short everything. They're going to make a ton of money. But while most of society is having a lot of difficulty. So when you have this social angst that's starting to build up, people are going to be looking for candidates that are saying socialism, socialism, socialism. This is the reason why FDR gained so much notoriety during the Great Depression and why they blamed everything on Hoover. Socialism erodes the society. Socialism erodes your freedoms. Capitalism is more aligned with protecting those freedoms that are aligned with the Enlightenment. This is why I keep on saying this is a battle for the Enlightenment or some sort of postmodernism. J.D. Vance is slightly leaning towards this postmodernism. It's just slightly leaning to it. Now, think about it. If the government is involved in deciding who's going to be the winners, who they're going to invest in, then you have people that are in government that will know where the momentum will be for a certain company. And they'll be able to position so they benefit financially. Now, J.D. Vance, even though I don't think he's a very good one, he was a venture capitalist. I don't think he knows about business so much, but he's in a position to take advantage of the situation. Now, Nancy Pelosi was egregious with her insider trading and knowledge, but it's happening also in the Republican Party. So J.D. Vance is part of this class of people that is tied to in venture capital, private equity, that wants crony capitalism. They benefit from crony capitalism. So it's a bigger issue than just watered down socialism.
Ideas and enjoyed huge political success. Reagan won 49 states in the 1984 election, and the country experienced spectacular economic growth. By contrast, Americans seem to hate Trump's quasi-progressive economic policies. His approval rating in the economy is just 33%. So it seems to me, for what it's worth, that pivoting away from Milton Friedman has not been such a good bargain for the right. The economy is underperforming and people don't like it. Vance thinks he's come up with something better than the economic philosophy that undergirded the right for a generation and catapulted the Republican Party to its greatest successes in a century. Maybe Milton Friedman and Ronald Reagan knew something that Vance should appreciate more. And look, He's up against Gavin Newsom or someone even more explicitly socialist or communist, like AOC or Ro Khanna. Why try to sell the American people on a watered-down version of the same leftist agenda they are running on? To defeat the enemies of liberty and prosperity, it will take a full-throated defense of the principles that made America and the Republican Party strong. I hope that Vance is up to that task. So I got a little tired of
Much of what you're doing as you journey through life is to continually expand your personality.
Is there one person that
So I
just
got-
totally overrated when it comes to podcasts is Peterson, Jordan Peterson. I am so sick of that guy. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Good Night Formula. This helps to get into the 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep so you consolidate your memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and to be well rested. With good sleep, you're going to slow down the aging process and maintain good brain function. Super important. You want to reduce your chances of dementia, sleep better. Good Night Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Take it every night, and it'll allow you to get into those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. Good sleep will slow down the aging process and improve your brain function. Myotrol. Myotrol will help to build muscle. If you're 40 years of age or older, it's hard to maintain muscle and to build it. You start to atrophy. Myotrol will help with the gene expression to build muscle. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. Now, what this will do is also help with brain function. Why? By building muscle, you're increasing your myokine concentrations and BDNF, which are neuroprotective. Building muscle helps with brain function. Losing muscle hurts brain function. This is part of the reason why when people get older, they lose energy, they have more inflammation, they have a weaker immune system, their endocrine system is disrupted, they have atrophy, they have less brain function. They're all connected. And if you've been paying attention to me for years, I've been saying that you need to synergistically approach the aging problem. It works if you pay attention to me. Now, Myotrol will also help to improve the health of your mitochondria so you have the ATP to maintain and build the muscles. Make sure that you do back muscle exercises, really important, especially when you get older. So you have more mobility, you'll be able to strengthen your spine and improve your posture. You'll have better venous return flow and lymphatic flow. So your immune system will improve by better back posture. People would say, huh? You have to pump venous fluid. The lymph has to pump upward. Well, if you're hunched over all the time because of poor back posture or working on the computer and just hunched over all the time, your venous return flow is poor and your immune system is poor because of the lymphatic system is not flushing properly. Just trust me on this, all right? So please go to my store, get the Myotrol. Make sure you do back muscle exercises. Now, Myotrol, again, helps with brain function because it's building up those compounds that help to protect your neuroconnections in your neurons. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll benefit from taking Myotrol to build strength for your sport. So it's for people that are 40 years of age or older, or if you're an athlete, younger or older. Gladiator barley. It works great with Myotrol to help build muscle. But Gladiator barley will also help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. That's going to help with your brain function, your cardiovascular health, help you to recover after a workout, improve your immune system, and help with your endocrine system. Take it every day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And again, Myotrol and Gladiator barley is a great synergistic combo. All right, let's continue with the Hill.
Tired of beating up on the left, so we decided
a lot of people must have felt strongly because I also was looking at your Twitter and it went crazy. A million people were viewing this, talking about your perspective and disagreeing or agreeing.
It was nice to see a lot of people sharing this sentiment. J.D. Vance was there taking on a really pivotal and fundamental figure to the right, Milton Friedman, the economist who advocated decentralizing control of the economy, deregulating, and so forth, whose ideas were implemented very successfully in some Latin American countries, in the U.S., by Margaret Thatcher, and so on. It worked great. It was politically a success story, and it was actually a success story for the American people. So why are we turning our back on that?
That train has left the station. The dominant GOP policy from Reagan up until 2010 was consistent with everything you're naming, right? Deregulation, lower taxes. These are the basic things that conservatives historically were asking for. Trump came in and, as you know, turned all of that on its head. So this is not like surprising news that the person that he picked to be his vice president has a similar economic policy as the president. I think what he was trying to say when I heard him speaking, because I watched the full clip because I was really interested in what he said. I think that J.D. Vance, and I made no secret of this, is a great orator, a great communicator. And part of what he was trying to say, I think leading into his Catholic faith, is what Catholic people think is that, human dignity is part of a life experience. And so we can't make it so unaffordable to live, so unaffordable to enjoy the pleasures of society, so unaffordable to not work 3 jobs. He wants people to be able to have one job and experience life, have children, buy a house if they want to, have a family, afford the family. And I don't think that those are dramatic asks. And when you align him to some people like the Democratic Socialists, because you're going so extreme with it, I think that he's not even that far left, but he's looking at this American dream that's fallen away from so many people and saying, I want to help restore that. And I don't think a lot of the stuff that he's aspiring to do is a bad thing.
But free markets are not in tension with affordability. Free markets make things more affordable. They lower the costs of goods and services. Everything you deregulate, you make it possible to have a larger supply of, it gets cheaper. So that's why I don't like what he's saying. He's saying, well, free markets might be okay a little bit, but it's more about human dignity and more about enjoying your time with your family. Okay, but free markets create those conditions. Like before there was free markets,
J.D. Vance is starting to create in the discussion realm of our politics this idea of increase the crony capitalism with the artificial intelligence companies and the companies that are aligned with the military industrial complex. And also this idea of, well, wait a minute, you're going to be working less because of artificial intelligence. You're going to be working less. We don't need as many people. So we're going to have some sort of readjustment of the society. We're going to have some sort of help by the government. Now, the Democratic Socialists are way on the other side of the spectrum where they want to control the means of production, take away property rights, rewrite the Constitution, have a one-party system. So they're way off on, way out there. But J.D. Vance is just starting the conversation for universal income. That's what this is all about. I don't trust J.D. Vance. I don't trust lawyers. Never have, never will.
Making farm labor gone to dust and died at 35. So the invention of market economies has allowed for the world population to be fed without everyone having to do field work. And that's created leisure time. Countries in South America and Africa that didn't have markets and introduced markets and trade, the literacy rate goes up. The women going to school rate goes up because women don't have to spend all their time doing domestic tasks. The invention of the washing machine allows women to become educated in places they didn't even know how to read before because less of your time needs to be spent doing labor. So that's the gift of the thing he's saying is
I
bad.
think that there's other nations you can look to. We're not looking to communist nations or socialist nations when you talk about mixing capitalism with industrial policy. And so if you look at places like Japan, I think that's what J.D. Vance more wants to replicate. Somebody who took an industry like we have AI and has the ability to invest in it as a country. The government supported Japan in moving forward to build things like Toyota and Sony. And it became so much support from the government that they were able to be one of the leading industries, leading countries for car manufacturing and other things. And so we're on the forefront of investing in AI and supporting it in a way where we own a lot of it or own some of it, like the president and Bernie Sanders have suggested, that perhaps our country will be enriched as we win this race that you so desperately want to win against China and other nations.
I don't like the idea of the government taking ownership in any of this. That's the government picking winners and losers. How do we know which AI?
Well, I mean, in Japan they did it, and it led to tons of jobs. It led to growth in the economy. I mean, they still we get.
What the industry needs is to be left alone by the government. I don't think they should be threatened or regulated in any way. But the idea of Trump, this administration, or really any administration, capturing part of the value for itself, well, then that's going to become the official state religion in terms of.
Well, for the good of the American people, not just for itself, hopefully.
Okay, but the government usually acts in its own self-preservation, not the good of the American people. What's good in the American people is for the government to leave it alone.
All right. Well, Vance doesn't think this is working, right?
Well, that's my advice to him. So much for.
J.D. Vance was a never Trumper until he became a Trumper. He's a capitalist until he becomes a socialist. I don't trust J.D. Vance. He even wears his beard, one to hide his double chin, but to look older because he's so young and inexperienced. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin D3. This is a dual purpose supplement that's very important to take every day. It helps with your cardiovascular health, helps with your immune system, helps with bone density, helps to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis if they're infected. It helps with gene expression because it's a gene expression cofactor. So please go to my store and make sure you take the vitamin D3 every day, but especially during the cold season. Heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. What does that do? I say this 1,000 times. It's going to help with your immune system and your endocrine system, help with your cardiovascular system, and help with your brain function. And you'll notice that you recover quicker after a workout because you're bringing down the inflammation. And another great supplement that you should be taking every day is the collagen. Collagen will help with the dermal layer of your skin. Collagen will help with your hair and your nails. It'll help with musculature, bone density, and joints. Take it every day. And I highly recommend to take the vitamin C and magnesium, drink filtered water, take the collagen. It will cross-link to improve that dermal layer so your skin is healthier. Please go to my store and get the collagen. And if you have arthritis or a sports injury with your joint, take the collagen and take some other supplements that I'll be talking about shortly here to be able to remodel the joint. The collagen, the collagen are very important to be able to rebuild that joint. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, the S&P 500 is at 7,530. And right now, natural gas is still hovering around the 3.2 range. It's at 3.23. I still believe that it's going to go down to 3.1. So let's just be patient. All right, let's see what's happening here. Let's go to Bloomberg.
Asking under, well, that's the problem. We're looking so far out in the future, we don't really know what demand is. We're going off of today's numbers about, how long it takes, how many compute cycles it takes to, rebuild one of these models. And my assertion is that will get better over time. So right now, whenever they're putting shovels in the ground, they're assuming things are staying like they are today. And I think that's a bad assumption.
If you were to compare what we're seeing right now with this tech boom and the enthusiasm, the unbridled enthusiasm for all things AI, if you were to compare it to the dot-com crash, what do you see? What do you not see happening?
So I think there will be disappointment. There always is. And actually, NVIDIA is kind of the poster child of disappointment. And that's the irony alert, right? That was the thing that started this whole craze, kind of where people were seeing, the demand for that company's products. Over time, it tends to flatten out. But I think you really have to look at what happened in those early years of the dot-com boom and understand it wasn't just one craze happening, it was three happening at the same time, and they all ended. So there was dot-com, there was also Y2K. I feel like a million years old bringing this up, but it was a real focus for companies for years to try to make these systems that were designed to work only if the date had a 19 in front of it, not a 20 for the year. So there's that. And then finally, we had a telecom craze going on. And that was kind of underneath the covers. Some people did, were great investors in that, but it didn't really get the press that the dot-com did. But all of those things kind of died between April of 2020 or April of 2000. And we'll say, the end of 2001. And that just made for a horrible, horrible tech time. So .com gets the blame, but there's a lot more going on there. So what about AI? We don't have a lot of those things, the same kind of macro forces that will suddenly come to an end. So I don't know that we can look back to that time and say that is what might happen.
Kim, thanks so much for joining us. Always appreciate chatting with you. Kim Forrest, founder and Chief Investment Officer at Boca Capital Partners.
Okay.
Based in
Campus Reform did some sort of clip about why young Americans accept socialists' distorted worldview. So let's listen into here. I haven't seen this, but I am very concerned of the youth gravitating to socialism, communism, because in schools they're not really being taught capitalism. Now, it's very interesting that William F. Buckley stated in his book about Yale in 1951 when he published it, on how when he was an undergrad at Yale, that you had liberal professors. Now, back then, they would be considered conservative today, but they had liberal professors at Yale pushing a different worldview. They were starting to push. So this all happened right after World War II for some reason. But there was this push where history was somewhat changed a little bit, or I shouldn't say history changed, but history, the emphasis was starting to change in the universities, especially at the elite institutions, right after World War II. And especially economics. And this is the rising up of Keynesian economics, and where you have this technocracy of the government telling you how your life should be. And you have experts that are going on top of the Cold War, the ramp up of the arms race with nuclear weapons, and you needed a technocracy to be able to maintain that infrastructure, maintain that capability. So what happened was the university started to shift towards the socialism. It starts with Keynesianism with monetary policy. Well, fast forward to 2026. So you got 1951 all the way to 2026. And you have a generation that really doesn't have a strong understanding of capitalism. They have a stronger understanding of communism, but it's in the lens and the rhetoric of Marx. Demonize capitalists. Demonize individuals that have something that you don't have. Don't work for it, just take it. And fast forward to this almost Mao-like takeover of the Democratic Party, where they want, it's almost like they have their own red book. You know, they're just following the Mao march to communism for China, but just an American version of it. So let's play the clip. It's the first time I heard of it. So let's see. I'll give you my opinion.
All right, I want to bring in my Gen Z roundtable. And we're more of an arc today, so everybody gets a view of what's behind us and in front. CJ Pearson is a podcast host and chairman of the Next 250 PAC. Chloe Capinato is an opinion writer for the Daily Wire. Gregory Lykoff is a campus reform correspondent. And Daniel DiMartino is a Manhattan Institute fellow. All right, so I am among the stars. Lightning round right now, starting with you, Daniel. What is your idea of the American dream?
I think it is being able to come from nothing and being able to achieve what you really want in life. And for me, that was coming from Venezuela and living the life that I wanted to be in the United States.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very similar that your own individual responsibility and effort will be the main contributor to your future success and the success of your children.
Wow. Okay. Chloe.
I think the American dream is knowing that no matter where you start, you can end up somewhere extraordinary. Every single person in this country has the ability to change the world just by being here. We're incredibly blessed, all one for it.
TJ.
I think the American dream is waking up every single day and knowing that you hit the lottery and that you are so blessed to know that you were born right here in the greatest country in the world. People are beating down the door to enter this country, and it's for good reason, Harris.
Look, I want to get real on a couple of things, and we have seen this play out, artificial intelligence and, young people your age faced with, well, is that going to take away part of my American dream? In reverse order, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm a lot more worried about China than I am about AI. And if they're allowed to win the AI arms race, what that actually means for the global world order. I think there's a way to promote and cultivate innovation, just like we did for the past 250 years, going into the next, but also to protecting the American worker. These are all things that we can have conversations all at once, not in silos.
Yeah, Harris, I think I'm more so worried about importing and electing leaders that have this sheer disdain for America. I think AI is a very useful tool that we can use to understand more about American history, understand where we came from, use it to build amazing American things and change the world.
If you guys are the future, I think we're going to be good. All right, Gregory.
Yeah, I think in general that AI is innovation, and what makes our country great is that we have innovation and we continuously innovate more and more. Every single situation, whether it's the Industrial Revolution, we have the same conversation. Will this take away jobs? And some people thought yes, some people thought no, but it resulted in what America is today, which is the greatest country with the most innovation and the most technologically advanced country in the world.
All right, I want to do something a little differently with you, Daniel, because you mentioned your family's history in Venezuela. We are taking a socialist tilt right now. What are your thoughts?
I am extremely worried because one of the reasons I picked America to get here was that I thought that this country was the least likely to go down the path of Venezuela. And I am really scared to see that there are leaders. It's not even that their policies are similar, but that they even admire Venezuela, admire Cuba, admire the Soviet Union. We have elected members of Congress and people who are likely to be elected who would do to us what the people who destroyed Venezuela did to me.
Wow. All right, I want to get to this. A recent poll shows a huge party division when it comes to patriotism. Less than half of Democrats now say that they are proud Americans compared to 93% of Republicans. Well, you know what? Have you seen their policies? Maybe that's why they're so miserable. Two other polls show young Americans are less patriotic than past generations. Far fewer say they are proud to be an American. This is a sad statistic, but it's something to deal with. So reverse order now. Daniel, how do we deal with it?
I think that the main reason this is happening is our education system. I didn't go through the American high school education system, so for me, coming from the outside, what I saw in America
it's really simple. The Democrats are promoting hate. Remember what I said, the Democrats aren't part of the Enlightenment, especially the ultra-liberal ones. They're not for God, country, and family. So if you're not for country, of course you're going to hate to be American, because they're tied into this whole oppressor and oppressed BS that that's getting promoted in these schools. Now, I think that what Fox should have done was had a panel of right of center Gen Z and left of center Gen Z and ask questions and see how they answered it. I think that would have been a better dynamic. But from what I have seen on campuses for my many years, I think what is happening is that there's more of an institutionalization of ultra-liberal policies within academia that is molding the minds of these individuals to be communists.
That's dropped for the liberty of Americans, but also my liberty in Venezuela. Look at what America is doing right now in Venezuela. Look at what they're doing in other countries. And I hope that more young Americans are taught the real history, the good and the bad, and show that the good is really much greater.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. I mean, look at what President Trump has done in Venezuela. And people, even from our shores, saying this is good for the people of Venezuela. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, look, there's a reason why the only American flag you'll see at these leftist protests is the one being burned. And that just goes to show what these people are being taught. The younger generation has been fed by our college education system to believe in this binary of oppressor versus oppressed ideology. That is so true. When you think the Western world is oppressive, then you're going to hate America. Look, Campus Reform just covered a story on this where UPenn, one of the world's renowned institutions, has 15 courses that celebrate America's 250th anniversary. 5 of them talked about slavery and immigration. Not one of them even mentioned the Declaration of Independence. That's crazy.
That is almost unbelievable. Wow. Well, Harris, luckily Gen Z does like their trends, and right now America is trending cool again, at least for young Republicans. We need to red, white, and blue pill, as we say, more than Republican. And how could you not? I mean, America's incredible. We are playing golf on the moon. All of the things that America's do. It's just that might be the only place my golf game can be at. You know, it's interesting. You talk about trending, as Chloe mentioned. Faith is also trending right now.
You're right. People are headed back to the church in a way in which we've never seen before. And I think we gotta give Charlie Kirk his flowers when it comes to that. I talk about his death not just sparking a revolution in this country, but a revival in a way in which we have never seen before. People are running towards tradition. They're running back towards patriotism. They're running back towards the values that make America America. And regardless of how much the left tries to convince us to hate this country, it's telling that they won't leave this country.
You know, mentioning Charlie Kirk in this context is so important because he was that individual that had so many rich conversations with Gen Zers in particular.
Right.
And in this moment, just a reminder of freedom is not free. And part of that religious freedom, that freedom of speech that he was about, and so many young people are now, and not just young, I'm raising teenagers. I have to be the light in their life. Like, I have to be the real deal. My husband and I have to be real about those issues. So it's our responsibility, our generation too. As we kind of close out this segment, I am curious to know how you deal with the politics of the moment. And are you seeing more people in your age group saying, I'm not going to vote or I'm going to vote?
You know, I think we got to reach people where they are. I mean, as Republicans, as conservatives, we got to go to the places where typically we would not have been seen before. You can't just preach to the choir. We got to do the hard work to grow the congregation. I refuse to believe the lies of the left of this country is something I should be ashamed of. I'm proud of it. The fact that I am sitting here as a product of a teen mom who was raised by his grandparents can sit here and reflect about how great this country is on Fox News, the testament to the American dream, and how it's enduring.
I think young people are really curious as to why things seem to be a little disheveled right now, and they want to learn more. So if we can reach them and teach them the history of America, why it is so incredible, and how we can prevent socialist policies and policies that would destroy our great nation from ensuing, I think that's the way to reach these young people and spread the message. All right, almost out of time, but I want to hear from you, Gregory.
Yeah, and the way you reform this is by changing our education system, by reforming it, by not allowing the left to control the institutions that allow our young people in this country to actually learn. That's where reform really needs to be.
I think it's about stories. I think that people are captivated by stories, and they were captivated by the stories of the left, and now we have to captivate them with the real story of America, which is a story of exceptionalism.
You know what? You're right. We call it testimony because America's been tested a lot.
And we all have a testimony.
And we all have testimony here, and we know how great our country is. We're coming right back. Stay.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the zeolite. This will help to detoxify your body. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue. Drink the filtered water. It will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. This is a great way to get healthy. And by detoxifying your body regularly, you're helping your immune system, your endocrine system, and your other organ systems, like your spleen, your kidneys, your liver, your brain, even your cardiovascular system. Now, this is the type of zeolite that you can take every day. Some zeolite you can't. This you can. It's very high quality, and it's important to detox. Now, this is one way to detox your body. Another way is to take the barley that I have, either the gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. Boomer Boost. This is your multivitamin. But you also get minerals, and you get other supplements within this that will help to slow down the aging process. This is a month's supply, has 68 nutrients. It's very comprehensive. Take it every day. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie. I make sometimes iced coffee with it, or put it in hummus, but take it every day. This is your multivitamin, right? But you can stack this with a lot of the other supplements that I have, like the Max 35, like the C60, the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and lignans, the resveratrol, the probiotics. And what Boomer Boost will do is it will give you all the nutrients you need. It'll help to slow down the aging process. It's going to help you to recover after a workout. It'll help you to control your blood sugar levels. It'll help with brain function, allow you to get rid of that brain fog. It'll help with sleep patterns. It will help with cardiovascular health, help with musculature, rev up your metabolism, and give you a steady burn of energy. The first time taking this, within 72 hours, you're going to start feeling the effects of it. You're going to have a steady burn of energy, and you're going to have more vitality. You're going to be more energetic. And when you're more energetic, you just live a better life. Now, like I said, you can stack this with the supplements that I just mentioned, and you can also stack it with the gladiator barley or the heirloom barley. And that's a great way to control your A1C levels, your blood glucose levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Again, this is your multivitamin, but you get a lot more than just a multivitamin in this. And it's going to help to slow down the aging process. I highly recommend taking it every day. And C60. C60 is a very potent antioxidant. And by doing this every day, a teaspoon a day, you're going to be able to soak up those free radicals, help the health of your mitochondria, and you'll have more energy. Your cells will perform better because it has less stress. The inflammation will go down. The free radical load will go down. This will also help to improve your neurons and reduce that inflammation at the neuron level and improve the positive neuroplasticity, so you're going to be thinking better. You're going to have better memory. And C60 helps the endocrine system and the immune system to properly function. And at the vascular level, by soaking up the free radicals, you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. So you're reducing plaque formation. So you're going to get better blood flow. You're going to have a healthier cardiovascular system. You're going to recover quicker after a workout. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce if you get the higher ounce configuration. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, and avocado oil. C60 has to be suspended in an oil for proper absorption. Please go to my store and get the C60. It is a very potent antioxidant. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. Take it every day. and you will notice that you're slowing down the aging process. Now, the C60 can be stacked with the Boomer Boost, but another great way to stack C60 is with resveratrol, and that will help the basal layer to help to improve your skin, because you have new skin cells that are generated, and they come from the basal layer. If the basal layer is healthy, your skin cells are healthy. If the basal layer is diseased or not functioning properly, your skin won't be as good. So it's important to stack it with resveratrol. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All righty, let's see here. Let's listen to Bloomberg.
To make sure that at least he isn't showing his cards, he's not participating in the dot plots, he's not really giving us a lot of he stands on these things. And I believe that the Fed minutes will be a different tone than under the previous chairman. So I just think that the market is now going to be forced to make decisions based on actual data that comes out, which is kind of what the Fed wants, right? Like the Fed would rather have the market participant and reaction as a data point as opposed to them following what the Fed's doing and therefore not being an effective data point for the Fed to kind of decide what's going on in the economy. So I actually think these minutes are going to have a very different tone than they have previously.
Shana, in your world of alternative investments, where do you see some value these days, or the best value?
Yeah, so in alternatives, I always talk about the diversifying alternatives, and I continue to say that because I think volatility is going to rise under this new regime at the Fed. And that means that you're going to want to look for ways to allocate portfolio positions to things that are going to help mitigate volatility. And those things are what I call diversifying alternatives. And for the layman out there, what that means is hedge funds, market neutral, long short equity, hedged equity, managed futures, the things that typically you don't want to own if you think the market's going to go straight up and be relatively not volatile. But if you think volatility is going to rise and we're going to have a little more uncertainty in the market, you're going to want to position yourself with things that can dampen volatility. And those are the types of things where I think people should be looking and have been largely ignored over the last, say, 10 plus years because they haven't performed well. It's really hard to perform if you're hedged and the market's going straight up. So these are things that I think people should be paying attention to, and they're available in ETFs and interval funds. You know, I talk about them all the time. There's CBLS, there's BTAL, there's managed future funds like CTA. These are all ETFs that you can put in your portfolio. Just a small position can make a big difference if you think that volatility is going to rise and you're afraid that risk assets might reflect that uncertainty and potentially have a sell-off. And these are the things that will protect you. But if you position it correctly, you can really help your portfolio without hindering any absolute returns you could get if you're wrong.
Gotcha. All right, Shana, thank you so much. Shana Sissel is founder and CEO of Brighteon Capital Management, joining us from Chicago. All those ideas sound great. It's just that when the market's going up, Paul, they don't get the returns that people want, and so people regret it immediately. And by the time they need it, it's too late because
all you gotta do is listen to my show. I'll tell you when to short and when to long. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the cleanse, which is 30 parts per million, or the max 35, which is 35 parts per million. What this will do is boost up your innate immune system, neutralize your oral cavity, help to neutralize and help to improve your oral pharynx, maintain a mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. When you're doing this, you'll have better oral hygiene, and when you have better oral hygiene, you're helping your cardiovascular system and your valvular system. A lot of people don't know that. But take a teaspoon a day every day. Swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and swallow it. Do that every day. And you're boosting up your immune system. I've been doing this for over 6 years, every day. Teaspoon a day, every day. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well because of the cold season, you should take a tablespoon, swish in your mouth, gargle, and then swallow. Do that every day, and that's going to help to boost up that immune system. And when you have a better immune system, adaptive and innate, then you get sick less. And when you get sick less, you're actually slowing down the aging process. People that get sick all the time need to spend time to remodel the damage. There's something called reversible necrosis, and it takes time to remodel the damage that took place. Well, if you're not sick as often, your body doesn't have to remodel as often. When you see people that get chronically sick every year, they age faster. You want to stop that. So please take my advice. Make sure you get the Max 35 for the cleanse and use it every day. Let's listen into Gordon Chan here.
Half my berries went fuzzy by Wednesday every week, and I just thought that was how berries worked. My friend who works in food safety testing had a different explanation for why it kept happening.
China's global ambitions now in focus following America's 250th anniversary as Beijing looks to replace the United States as the world's leading economic and military superpower. Wall Street Journal arguing that Xi Jinping is now drawing tactics from notorious authoritarian leaders like Stalin or Mao to expand his power and remain leader indefinitely. I spoke with former Deputy National Security Advisor Victoria Coates on Sunday. She explained how Chinese propaganda promotes communism, and it is reaching our shorelines. Watch.
China is so much more active in the information space than we are. And think about where that generation is getting their information. Overwhelmingly, it's TikTok. China controls those algorithms. And so they're controlling what those younger viewers or consumers rather are learning about China. And they're not obviously learning about their genocide against the Uyghurs. They're not learning about the fentanyl coming into the United States, killing a lot of our young people. They're learning that China, is this great technological wonder, that they're going to lead on AI, that we shouldn't want to get into a war with China. Well, that's the last thing I want too. But at the same time, we have to be clear-eyed about these risks. This is communist China we're talking about. They're putting the best possible face on totalitarian communism. I didn't think there was one, but they're apparently fairly effective at it. And that's what we have to combat.
Joining me now, Gaystone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, your reaction to how really the CCP has infiltrated the social media landscape of our nation?
Good morning, Cheryl. And clearly, China uses the TikTok algorithm to promote its narratives. Right after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we saw all of these pro-Russian narratives. There have been pro-Hamas narratives. 96.5% of the videos on Hamas on TikTok support that terrorist group. And that really indicates why we have all of these protesters on our college campuses promoting barbarism, torture, murder of Hamas. So it's very clear. They have used every channel to poison the minds of Americans. And clearly, this is something we know about. We have the means to stop it. But as a society, we have chosen not to do so. So yes, the Chinese are villains, but we've got to start defending our own society. This is on us.
Yeah, and certainly TikTok, again, with that divestiture, that was the entire reason, but is it effective? And you're the second person to say to me, no, it's not. They're using the algorithm on TikTok to get this messaging across. Now, China ramping up pressure on Taiwan. Its Coast Guard is now expanding patrols east of the island. Beijing and Moscow are set to hold joint military drills this week. Xi Jinping reportedly just promoted 2 new military generals over the weekend as part of a reorg at the top. Gordon, I want to get your take on these latest moves from Xi Jinping.
Yeah. On June 6th, China launched a civilian law enforcement patrol in the waters east of Taiwan in the Pacific. And at the same time, China announced that it had sovereignty over the Pacific. And this is stunning. Basically, this is international water, of course, and yet China believes that it has annexed the part of the Pacific Ocean. The United States has got to make a decision. I mean, where do we stop the Chinese? Do we stop them in Taiwan, or do we wait until they get off the shores of Hawaii and California? Xi Jinping has this notion that he is the world's only sovereign ruler, and we think that's ludicrous. Of course it's ludicrous, but the point is not whether it's brazen or not, it's what he's actually saying and what he's doing. He's annexed the South China Sea for all intents and purposes. Now he's moving on to the Pacific. This guy is not going to stop until we stop him.
Meanwhile, acting as he's a friend of the United States and still making these moves, which is really out of the playbook, again, out of not just him, but the CCP. Lee Carter, jump in here.
I really want to go back to the conversation about social media, if we can, because I go back to the conversations that we were having about Russia all the years ago and the influence they were having on the elections and our mindset. And I think so many people look at this and are really dismissive. So much of our information comes through algorithms, through summarization, through AI, through TikTok. 70% of young people are getting their news this way. This is really a form of emotional warfare or social warfare. What can Americans be doing to look out for this or really make sure that they're taking this seriously? Because I think a lot of people are dismissive and saying, oh, I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm doing, but they're not really clear on how much they're being manipulated and influenced. This is a whole new frontier. And I just want to make sure that people really understand what to watch out for.
Well, Lee, the most important thing here is that we've known about this for a long time, and we have not been able to do anything about it. So obviously, if we want to stop China from poisoning America, from fomenting violence on our streets and all the rest of it, we're going to have to cut those links with the Chinese regime. I know that that's not politically possible at this point, but it's absolutely necessary if we're going to save our republic, because we've seen what the Chinese have done. In 2020, they were messing in our election. They were messing in our election in 2024. We see them in local elections, state elections. And, you know, this is something that we have the means to stop, because after all, Lee, this is our country.
You know, Gordon, certainly it is such an important conversation as we move into the midterms, and the fact that you know, the younger generation is absorbing this and believing it. To your point earlier about the Hamas videos and the support that we're seeing on college campuses, it really is. Final word, it's just really disconcerting and almost heartbreaking that this younger generation doesn't understand the truth about what's happening overseas.
Yes, I mean, we have an educational system that has sort of forgotten how great America is, because America has been and still is the greatest force for good in the world. And people right now don't understand the dangers of socialism and of communism, because we felt at the end of the Cold War it was the end of history. Well, no, it's not, because bad actors are now trying to promote dangerous ideologies to the American people. And as we see, they're extremely successful with Gen Z.
Gordon Chang, it's always a pleasure having you in the program. Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the toothpaste. This toothpaste has structural nanosilver. It's going to be able to neutralize, whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with your gum line, reduce inflammation at your gum line, and with good oral hygiene, you're helping your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. Very important. Many people don't realize this, that poor oral hygiene can lead to problems with your cardiovascular system. This has no fluoride. Get a few tubes of this toothpaste for your household. Use it every day, especially during the winter season. Why? Because it's structural nanosilver and it helps to neutralize. If you have pains like muscle aches, arthritis, tension headaches, bruising, if you're an athlete and you need some pain relief, Super Strong Relief is a great way to relieve that pain temporarily. It works within about 90 seconds. You just use it as a topical in the area where the pain is, and it will eliminate or greatly reduce it. And again, it helps with tension headaches. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Super Strong Relief. It's perfect for people that have arthritis. All right, let's listen into robotic suppliers could crush competition in next AI wave.
The car is preferred for a reason. Chase Sapphire Preferred.
Possible. Even if you think debugging involves pest control, I just tell Canva what I need.
I want to bring it out Ivana Dolevska, Sphere Invest founder, CIO. Were you doing your little happy dance with the robot stuff? This is a robotic supply chain site I found. This is phenomenal. I love it. I didn't realize 162 companies, 104 public, 58 private, 8 layers, 51 subcategories. That's saying, when I hear all of that, it sounds like money, 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 money. Talk to us about where this is right now.
Well, Charles, we're in the very early innings of the robotics trade. We've been talking about agentic AI. That's where the big dollars are going in today. But the next trade will be robots. The question is going to be, when will they come? And from market perspective, I think it's going to look like very similar to the automotive market. So you're going to make a lot of money on the supplier side. I think that's going to be the money maker, and that's what people should be focused on. I think the robotics companies themselves, it's going to be a pretty fragmented market initially, and then we'll likely consolidate to 1 or 2 winners. But the suppliers will benefit no matter what. So that's what we are looking for.
And that's again, to your point, there used to be 100 automobile companies, and eventually there were 3, but throughout that whole period, the suppliers made a whole lot of money. I think I read somewhere going from 3 billion to 200 billion over the next, like, maybe 6-7 years. This is all part also, of course, of what they call physical AI. So we talk so much about the Gen AI, reasoning, agentic, and now physical AI. Just the impact beyond, this is going to impact a lot of the names that we already talk about, right?
Absolutely. So the hardware suppliers are going to be basically the same. The mix will shift from one to the other. So, for example, the Gen AI era was the model training era. This is where you needed a lot of GPUs. That was the biggest bucket of spend. In the agentic AI era, we're spending a lot on CPUs, memory, and networking. And then physical AI will go kind of back to the big GPUs spending, because what's happening is with robots is that they need to be trained. So you're going to need a lot more training than what we needed just from getting like search results.
No wonder Jensen's pounding the table.
That's right.
Hey, let's talk about a huge news item today. Meta this morning say, hey, we've got some spare capacity, I guess, compute. We're going to get in that. We're going to use cloud to do it. Already, folks have maybe anticipated this. Wells Fargo put out a beautiful chart talking about the opportunity here. How big is it?
Well, it's a pretty big opportunity for Meta because they do have this underutilized compute, and people weren't quite appreciating that part of the story, which is why the stock is up. I think if they really want to make a game-changing move here, they need to figure out how to use this compute, right? So that's basically the pushback, that they haven't really kept up with innovation with the Anthropics and the OpenAIs of the world. So the question is, why do you have this excess compute? So I think it's still a positive, but not as big as
it could be. Well, I mean, listen, it seems like they are grasping for straws, and maybe these are some of the things that helps out that will help investors, because I know a lot of people, myself included, stuck in the stock. I want to talk about a couple names that you like. You kind of alluded, I think, maybe to the semi-cap names and the Lam Research and KLA Tencor. You still like these names?
That's right. So this is one of our favorite areas to get exposure to the memory trade and the CPU trade, because these are companies that provide the equipment that will help add capacity both for memory and CPUs. And we think that while memory and CPUs are already in the second or third year in the cycle, this cycle just inflected last year. So you're a little earlier in this trade compared to
stocks. I'm telling you, almost every week, a couple of sessions a week, they're in the top 10% indicators, and they're just sort of going right under the radar. I want to, before I let you go, switch to software, which is acting better today. It's interesting because the cybersecurity to software, they just crushed it. It's been that niche of software that's done extraordinarily well. They've shaken off AI jitters, and you'd say there's a name here that you like a lot, NET.
So yes, we really like Cloudflare, but Charles, to back up here, cybersecurity is significantly better positioned than the rest of the software space because they play in a niche that will never get displaced. So you're not going to do your own cybersecurity.
When you hear about Metros and all these kind of things, because initially those stocks did go down on that kind of news.
Exactly, and that was really the entry point, right? Because they very quickly partnered with the likes of Cloudflare to solve the cybersecurity challenges. So basically, Cloudflare today, most of the traffic on the web just surpassed to where robots are bigger than humans. And this is really their sweet spots. They basically provide the DDoS
protection, but also a lot of other cybersecurity tools on top of that. So this is one of our favorite plays. But cybersecurity as a sector, I think has been overlooked this year, and it's time to look for more opportunities
This
there.
was absolutely phenomenal, and according to the charts there. Ivana, thank you so much.
I think she's right about the cybersecurity, especially when we start hearing that the Chinese are getting capabilities in AI to get into other systems of their enemy, right? Another issue is you have AI models populating around the world now, and you have nefarious actors. So cybersecurity stocks are probably going to do pretty well. Right now, I'm a macro trader. I'm not a micro trader, but that industry probably will do relatively well in the near term. I think it's fascinating, this transition from training the frontier models to go into AI systems that have feedback loops and that are learning from each other, agentic AI, and then the transition into humanoid robots, and how it's going to affect the chip market, where the first bucket was heavily reliant on GPUs. The second bucket is becoming more reliant on CPU and maybe even TPU, I'm not sure, and then memory, and then the humanoid robot going back to GPU. So it's interesting in how that wave of AI infrastructure and learning changes the composition of what chips will be bought. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nanosilver gel. This gel, you can get it in the tube form or in the quick dispenser form. And it's dual purpose. You can put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. It'll stay active for 5.5 hours. Great for allergies, the cold season, but you can use it as a daily skincare to improve your skin. And if you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, it'll help to heal it quicker, about a third of the time quicker. So please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver gel. It has the structural nanosilver, so it neutralizes. Really important. You never know when you need it. Now, before we go, I want to play this video that was posted 2 hours ago. This is by Mike Wilson, See Semiconductor Stocks Correcting.
Behind every great golf shot is smarter manufacturing. AT&T Business helps connect the factory floor and the supply chain, offering precision in every swing.
We begin this now with stocks adding to gains to kick off the first full week of the first quarter, the third quarter. Mike Wilson of Morgan Stanley writing, falling energy prices, peaking tariff inflation, and contained services keep the Fed on hold rather than hiking this year. Lower real rates should support equities and further fuel the broadening trade. I'm pleased to say that Mike joins us around the table for the next hour. He joins us for more. Mike, good morning. Good to see you. Good morning. Let's just start with the stability we're seeing in the rates market and how important that is to set the stage for what you're anticipating in the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were saying it earlier. I was listening to the show. I mean, there's somebody expecting a hike, there's someone expecting a cut, and we're on hold. And this is, I think, what we got to get used to is that with the new chair probably not giving as much guidance, is going to allow the market to kind of figure it out on its own and have these different views. We're in that adjustment period now. And I think that's one of the reasons why the market's been a little choppy or even correcting in the last month or so, is we're getting used to this new regime, which is going to be higher volatility and potentially the bond market. But over time, I think what's going to end up happening is the market's going to settle down. It's actually more estimates, a wider dispersion of estimates actually leads to lower volatility in the pricing over time, but we're in that adjustment period. So we think rates are lower ultimately, particularly at the back end. And oh, by the way, we've talked about this on the show many times. New Treasury Secretary, new Fed chair, this kind of new Fed Treasury accord to really anchor the back end. That's what they're focused on. We got to get the back end down, or at least anchored, because you have so much debt that you have to basically finance.
Do you think in the meantime we're confusing a reduction in guidance with an increase in hawkishness?
Yes.
In the meantime?
Yeah, I think that's right. And the market's pricing that now. So that's the good news, is that we've already had that adjustment. And that adjustment started 4 months ago, right? This is why precious metals have traded really poorly. You know, the day that Warsh was announced as a nominee, the gold market peaked. And that was a sign the dollar has been stronger. So once again, the market has really gotten ahead of this.
So rates have reset. We've come down from around 4.2% to 4.1. There's a belief this morning, at least, we've removed the urgency to hike as soon as July. So we can put that story to bed. Crude's decline, massive reset in crude from triple digits down to the 60s on WTIs. Does that open the door within the equity market? And let's talk about the stock market exclusively. Does that open the door to the broadening trade again?
Yeah, that's our call, basically, is that was happening at the beginning of the year. Then we had Venezuela and then Iran. By the way, the market priced Iran before the invasion even happened, or the attacks happened, because once again, it was pretty well signaled. And so that's when the broadening trade stopped. The broadening trade literally stopped the day that the attacks happened. And we had the big spike in oil, and then the pricing of the Fed to hike rates since, or I say mid-May, which is when we reiterated the broadening call. We had a different view than most. We thought oil prices would come down. And that has allowed now Fed pricing to sort of stabilize, and that has allowed the broadening trade to reignite.
Small caps have performed nicely, just had a massive quarter, up by more than 20% on the Russell. We've seen the broadening trade speak to the performance we've seen in the equal weight on the S&P 500 as well. Let's talk about the Mag 7, which increasingly was called the Lag 7. You've got a note out this morning talking about maybe the money going back into the hyperscalers. Just walk us through how you're thinking about what's happened in tech and that divergence between the big spending companies and the beneficiaries of all that spending, and the divergence that's really widened in the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, there's a symbiotic relationship between the spenders and the beneficiaries, and typically they trade sort of in lockstep. And a couple things we've been writing about for the last several months. Number one, CapEx to sales. That particular factor has been straight up since the Big Beautiful Bill was passed, right? That basically the government's incenting businesses to spend money today rather than later. And so that CapEx to sales factor has been driving a lot of stocks higher. That looks like it's peaking now. And by the way, the hyperscaler stocks started to trade poorly about a month and a half ago and into this idea. But that's not sustainable. You can't have the spender stocks trading poorly and the beneficiary stocks continuing to go straight up. And now what we saw last week, Meta announced that perhaps they're going to sell some excess capacity, maybe turn into a provider of capacity. That is just a reason for these things to take a break. Also, peak rate of change on revision breadth, right? The memory stocks, revisions have been spectacular, but they can only go so high. So all of that's kind of happening at the same time. And I expect the hyperscalers now to stabilize. That's what's going on the last couple of weeks. And the semiconductor stocks are going to correct. That's a good development. It doesn't mean the CapEx cycle is over, but that ebbing and flowing between the two is a natural kind of governing factor, because you can't have this divergence continue. It's unstable.
Your words take a brain. That's interesting. Some people have called it a narrative shift for the overall trade, and maybe a shift in spending too. Why is it one and not the other?
Well, we don't know for sure, but we've had 3 of these already, John. So since ChatGPT was announced in November of 22, we've had 3 of these sort of mini cycles within the broader structural CapEx cycle, which is that the market starts to question, the return on capital isn't good enough to support this kind of CapEx. What happens then? The stocks trade poorly, and then the CEOs of those companies come out and say, well, maybe we won't spend as aggressively, and then it ebbs the other way. And so that's the story. That's the dance back and forth. Now, there is going to be a period, there's going to be a time, we don't know when it's going to happen yet, where the CapEx cycle will exhaust itself, and we will have, we've talked about this, that there is going to be malinvestment here. We don't think that spending cycle is over, because they just started raising the capital in the credit market. So they're going to spend the capital, okay? So, but we can have these mini cycles in the structural bull market of CapEx.
I think, as you know, though, forget the spending that's not yet happened. It's the intentions that matter, and a deceleration in CapEx intentions from here. How do you think this market's going to internalize the prospect of that in the coming months?
Well, it's doing it right now. So we talk about it as a peak rate of change, or trough rate of change, second derivative growth. And that's exactly what's going on. There's 2 things we're focused on. Earnings revision breadth for the semiconductor stocks themselves are like 75%. That's about as high as it goes. We've documented that. So that's going to roll over. That doesn't mean it goes negative, but the deceleration on that can cause those stocks to correct. And then, of course, the hyperscalers will benefit if the market perceives these companies as being somewhat CapEx disciplined, that they're not going to to willy-nilly spending in a way where free cash flow, goes to zero or negative. And by the way, free cash flow expectations for some of those companies are going towards zero. That's why they've underperformed. So it's this dance, like I said, back and forth. And now in the last week and a half, some of the hyperscaler stocks have started to trade better. That's a good sign that we're going to have this little correction. This could last, 4, 6, 8 weeks, something like that. And then we'll probably have the next upcycle for the Senate.
These are the names that were in bear markets. I'm talking about Meta and Microsoft. Meta had a better week last week. Chips, you keep using this word correct. When I hear that, I'm just thinking, what do you mean by that? How much is the downside? How big is the downside for some of these chip names?
Well, these are high beta stocks. I mean, they can correct 30, 40% in a bull market. No, by the way, just look at the 200-day moving average. That's probably a really good gauge. These stocks are so extended relative to those moving averages. That's how you got to think about it. Those moving averages exist for a reason, right? They always return to the moving averages. Does it happen in a violent way or does it happen kind of gradually over time? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, 30% correction in these stocks is, well within a possibility. In fact, some of them already have corrected 30%.
You can have a 30% correction in chips. Just bear with me here. And you can still see the index move up and to the right on the S&P 500, even with the massive weighting they have.
But we didn't say
S&P.
that.
That's what I'm asking.
That's part of our call too, is that we think this rotation is happening in a down tape.
Okay.
Unlike the correction we saw in the precious metal stocks in January, because they're such a small part of the index. Energy stocks had a big correction after having a great run in January and February. Now the market traded off a little bit because of the war itself. But so I agree with what you're saying, or your premise of your question, which is, since these stocks are such a big part of the index, it's going to be really hard for the index to make any upward progress until this rotation has sort of happened.
This is a summer story for you?
Oh yeah, we're not bearish on the year end. We're still 8,000 plus for year end, and we've had that call for quite a while based on the earnings story. So that earnings story is very much intact. In fact, the fact that we're rotating now to some of these other areas almost confirms the thesis we've had all year, which is this is not just a tech story. That's a great story, but the broadening story is the story that I think people have really underestimated. The rolling recession from a year ago, this operating leverage story, which I think is still very underappreciated.
Do you think the banks can start working now too?
Well, they have been. The money center banks and the capital markets banks really have been.
Your stock, absolutely. Goldman stocks, fantastic. I'm talking about the others.
The regionals. And so they've started to perform. And that's been an area we've been highlighting. Now, the yield curve is flattening still, or is having trouble kind of re-steepening. So I think that group could pause a bit. We took that off of our list of favorites for the broadening trade this week. But ultimately, between now and year end, we do think the banks are going to do quite well, because this is the strategy of the Treasury and the Fed, is they want more lending going through the traditional lending sector. So while the yield curve is flattening, loan growth is accelerating, and that's feeding this whole broadening out story of the economy, right? This is a strategy of the administration. They want a privately driven, organic economic expansion, and that's what we're getting. Notwithstanding that maybe the labor market isn't as robust as some people were hoping, but that's also then feeding the earnings story, right? Because you're seeing revenue growth without a crazy need to hire a bunch of people, and that's the operating leverage story 101.
We'll talk about that cost discipline through the hour. Mike Wilson and Morgan Stanley is going to be sticking with us. Equity futures in this session highs up by about 0.4% this morning on the S&P, with an update on stories worldwide.
All right, so just beware of the semiconductor correction that may happen. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer and help support the work that I do. All these videos for free. Be a paid member to my Patreon channel, Substack channel, and you can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. Thank you for listening. That's the end of my broadcast, and have a nice day.